Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Undying Fire, Truth and Lies in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 19, Seeker of Truth. Zuko slammed the book shut and shoved it back on the shelf. Nothing. Iroh frowned. Zuko. Zuko stomped past his uncle to the next shelf and pulled out a fresh pile of scrolls and books. He already knew what Iroh was going to say, and he didn't want to hear it. The Fire Nation section had been burnt to ashes. At his uncle's suggestion, the two of them had backtracked to the room where information on bending and the previous avatars was stored, hoping to find some records about the children of the Undying Fire. So far, fire healers had not even been mentioned. It was as if the children of the Undying Fire had never existed. There has to be something, Zuko muttered, flicking through the pages of a book in a feverish manner. Finding nothing of value, he tossed the book aside and picked up a scroll. People just can't erase history. There has to be something. Iroh sighed and closed the text he had been reading. Zuko, he tried again. Zuko wasn't listening. He scanned the scroll in his hand, a drawing of a creature that looked like a lion crossed with a turtle, and then rolled it up again in disgust. He was already reaching for the next book on his pile when his uncle's hand closed around his wrist. "Nephew, stop," Iroh's voice was set and tired. "I do not think you will find what you are looking for here." Zuko hunched his shoulders. "You don't know that. There are still plenty of shelves that we haven't searched. And normally I would be just as optimistic, but the fact remains that we have searched all of the shelves dedicated to firebending. Don't you find it strange that there was no mention of fire healing in any of the texts?" Zuko's chest tightened. Of course he had noticed the omission. He had just preferred to dismiss the matter from his mind. Wan Shi Tong's library was overflowing with ancient records. It seemed ridiculous that such a fountain of information could hold nothing, not even the smallest scrap of evidence, to help shed light on the children of the Undying Fire. Ridiculous, yet somehow typical. Zuko's luck had always been bad. "You think that everything was destroyed in that fire," Zuko concluded in a dull voice. "Most likely." There was an unspoken but attached to the sentence. Zuko waited for his uncle to elaborate, but Iroh said nothing. Instead, a distant gleam entered his eyes and he stroked his beard in a contemplative manner. It was obvious that his mind was elsewhere, thinking of thoughts to which only he was privy. Zuko resisted the urge to sigh in exasperation. He hated it when his uncle went all cryptic. "Uncle," Zuko prompted. "It bothers me," Iroh admitted. "No matter how you look at it, the fact that fire healing exists means that one of these texts on fire bending should have contained some kind of acknowledgement to the technique." Zuko folded his arms across his chest. "But there is nothing." "Indeed. There is something not right about this situation. I told you that the records I read in the palace archives had been poorly maintained and were barely legible. After coming here, I think that might have been intentional." "What do you mean?" "Someone wanted the children of the Undying Fire to be forgotten." Iroh met his eyes grimly. "The palace archive is a place that few know about, let alone can access. It is home to the Fire Nation's secret history, every dark deed and buried truth, yet the scrolls stored about the children of the Undying Fire had seemed incomplete when compared to the others. It wouldn't be a stretch to suppose that those records, perhaps even others, have been sabotaged to destroy any solid trace to the Benders." Zuko released a breath. "But why? What's so bad about fire healing? Why would someone go to such lengths?" Iroh shook his head. "I don't know. However, it worries me that this tampering has reached even Wan Shi Tong's library." Zuko's gaze shifted to the shelves brimming with books and scrolls. He felt helpless. There was so much information being stored in the library. Information gathered from all over the world. It seemed a cruel blow that none of it was of any use to him, especially if it was true that the only reason for why he had found nothing was because someone had tried to erase all of the evidence. His stomach twisted in unease as he remembered what Wan Shi Tong had said. "I thought the humans had destroyed your kind. Not one nation, as his uncle had inferred, but humans as a whole." It was an awful, sickening possibility. If Wan Shi Tong was to be believed, the world had feared and despised fire healers so much that they had committed mass genocide to get rid of them. True, There was no saying whether all of the nations had actually participated in the killing, but it sounded like no one had stepped in to stop the slaughter either. Just like with the air nomads, a small voice whispered in his mind. Zuko bowed his head. Emotions too tangled to unravel pricked his heart like a caress of thorns. It was his great-grandfather who had ordered all of the air nomads to be hunted and killed. The rest of the world had just turned a blind eye. Until recently, Zuko had even believed in the propaganda that had justified the genocide. Sozin had been a wise leader, just doing what he had to in order to protect his people from the threat of the Airbender army and an avatar who, it was claimed, was being raised to destroy the Fire Nation. It was an us or them justification that had been ingrained into Zuko's mind through countless lessons. And it was all lies. No one who had got to know Aang would believe that the monks had raised the boy to be a weapon for the air nomads. Aang could be thoughtless, erratic, and a complete idiot at times, but there was no real viciousness in him. Zuko could admit that now. The devastation caused to the Fire Nation at the North Pole had been a rare moment of violence, birthed from desperation and grief. It was true that Zuko had not been able to understand as much then, consumed by his own distress after watching the Navy get obliterated by a glowing monster. He understood now. The Fire Nation had destroyed the air nomads. Aang had probably assumed the same thing was going to happen to the Northern Water Tribe. An unbiased part of Zuko could even acknowledge that something like that might have happened had Zhao and the Navy not been stopped. The people of the Fire Nation had always been good at following orders. And it was a Fire Lord who had sworn an oath to destroy the children of the Undying Fire. Zuko's hands trembled. There was a part of him, the part who had knelt on a stone arena and tearfully proclaimed that he was his father's loyal son, who still yearned to cling to the justifications that had helped him view the world in black and white throughout his childhood. The Fire Nation was home. The Fire Lords were supposed to be obeyed without question, for they were the best and wisest of the country, chosen by Agni himself to govern. But Zuko's faith had been shattered. It had cracked and been chipped away by a stupid kid who offered shy smiles and friendship instead of threats. It had burned with the fire that had consumed his memories and untethered him from the ingrained loyalty that had blinded his eyes. Now, standing in Wan Shi Tong's library, Zuko felt the very foundations upon which he had built his faith crumble. He was one of the children of the Undying Fire. His kind had been hunted and killed just like the air nomads. What was the justification? Was it just another lie fabricated by one of his royal predecessors, twisted through propaganda to appear as an unfortunate necessity? He had to know the truth. He had to know why the simple fact that he could use his bending to heal was such a crime in the sight of the world, even to the point where people had intentionally tampered with historical records to erase any evidence of the healers. Zuko clenched his hands into fists. I'm going to talk to Wan Shi Tong. Maybe the books couldn't help him, but the overgrown owl definitely knew something about the children of the Undying Fire. His uncle must have seen his determination, because he didn't even blink at the announcement. He just nodded and told Zuko that they would have to be careful. Wan Shi Tong was not a benign spirit. I know, Zuko said grimly, but this could be my only chance to get information about my healing abilities. Iroh gripped him by the shoulder. Then let us make haste. The two of them made their way through the web of rooms and stone archways, seeking out the spirit who guarded the library. It was like walking through a maze. The avian faces that had been carved into the mosaic tiles seemed to watch their progress, as if Wan Shi Tong's eyes were following their every move. Mocking. Uncaring. The stone owls watched, but there was no sign of the real spirit. Zuko's blood boiled. He knew that Wan Shi Tong was aware of their presence and their desires. He stopped on the bridge where they had first arrived, jaw clenched, and his eyes narrowed. Wan Shi Tong! He yelled, voice echoing off the walls. Show yourself! Iroh groaned and pressed his palm against his forehead. Nephew, you cannot order a spirit around. Especially not one like Wan Shi Tong. Zuko didn't care. He was sick of being ignored and treated like nothing more than a source of amusement. Wan Shi Tong! He called again, turning in each direction in an attempt to get a glimpse of the owl. That was when the walls started shaking. Zuko stumbled on the bridge, almost losing his footing. Sand shook down through the cracks in the walls and ceiling, gathering intensity by the second until it was as if grainy waterfalls had burst forth from every corner of the room. Pillars trembled and the stone under their feet seemed to heave and groan. Zuko's heart quickened in his chest. Had his shouting awakened the spirit's wrath? What's happening? He stammered. Iroh pushed him towards the rope that led back to the desert. We have to get out of here. But the library is being destroyed. Iroh exclaimed, and gave him another push. No information is worth your life. We have to get out while we can. Zuko hesitated. He desperately wanted that information about the children of the Undying Fire. Plus, Aang and the others were still inside. Then he heard another voice, a girl shouting in panic that the library was sinking. It was Toph, the blind girl who had chosen to stay outside with the sandbenders. For a moment, it almost seemed like the shaking slowed, but then there were more shouts. Too many. Too violent. Iroh's eyes narrowed. We need to get to the surface. The young earthbender is in trouble. Zuko knew that his uncle was right, but he still hesitated. He needed that information. If there was any chance to learn the truth about his healing abilities, he had to take it. Go, he told his uncle. I'll be right behind you. Zuko. I won't let myself get trapped in here, he said with a ghost of his cocky smile. I'll be quick. Besides, someone has to make sure the others get out safely. Iroh didn't look happy at leaving, but then they heard what sounded like an air bison groaning in pain. Toph screamed something and the building started shaking again in earnest, only to slow a few seconds later. Iroh glanced up at the window that led outside in worry. Whatever was happening out there, it sounded bad. Go, Zuko repeated. I swear I'll follow you. Iroh pulled him into a hug that crushed his ribs, entreating him in a low voice to be careful. Then Iroh's arms were gone and the old man was clambering up the rope to join the earthbender outside. Zuko turned away from his uncle's retreating figure and hurried across the bridge. Sand continued to fall, coating the pathway and getting in his hair. No time to worry about that now. He had to be fast. Wan Shi Tong. Zuko yelled, running through the maze-like corridors and rooms. Where are you? He rounded a corner and collided with Katara, almost tripping over her legs as he got tangled with her in a bruising collision of chins and elbows. They both gasped and clutched at each other to steady themselves. Momo made an indignant sound and flew off her shoulder to find a safer perch. What happened? He demanded. Where are the others? No time for that, Katara said, grabbing him by the arm and pulling her with him. Just run. Zuko glanced over his shoulder to see Wan Shi Tong speeding towards them like a thing from a nightmare, almost oozing feathers as his size seemed to increase, filling up the space to block their escape. Everything about the owl's expression screamed cold fury, but Zuko had never been one to give up. He had to get that information. Wait. He slipped free of Katara's grip and held out his hands towards the owl in an appeasing gesture. Please, I just need to know the truth. I swear I'll leave this library and never return, but I just need to know. Who are the children of the Undying Fire? Why did that Fire Lord swear an oath to destroy them? Wan Shi Tong laughed. What does it matter? None of you will be leaving today. But the owl lunged. Slender fingers latched around Zuko's wrist and he found himself being dragged behind the cover of a bookshelf as a sharpened beak hit the spot where he had just been standing. Are you crazy? Katara hissed. Why are you trying to talk to him? Wan Shi Tong wants to kill us. I had to try. He might be the only one who can tell me anything about my healing abilities. Well, I don't think he's in a talkative mood. Zuko opened his mouth to respond, but then a feather drifted past his face and he instead grabbed her by her arms, pulling her up against his chest. A second later they were moving through the air in a dive-like motion, just missing being shredded by the owl's talons. Katara met Zuko's gaze in wide-eyed fear as they rolled to a stop. That had been too close. I think we should run now, she said. Agreed. They both clambered to their feet and started sprinting towards the main bridge. Zuko's bending was useless, but he had his swords. He unsheathed them just in case while Katara called for Momo. The lemur appeared a second later, looking frazzled and with his green eyes rounder than ever. Where are Aang and Sokka? Zuko asked as he and Katara ran side by side. Probably still in the planetarium, she panted. I told them to hurry, but... Her words turned into an alarmed cry. Wan Shi-tong appeared before them, massive wings spread wide. Katara lashed out at the owl with a water whip, not even checking to see if the attack connected before she tugged on Zuko's wrist, urging him down a side corridor. He followed her without resistance, Momo gliding overhead. For now, there was no sound of pursuit. Think we lost him? She asked. Don't know. He paused when he noticed the sleek furred animal staring at them from where it sat in the middle of the corridor. He'd never seen a fox before. Most animals were crossbreeds, but somehow he knew that the creature before him was indeed a fox. Pure and simple. Is that one of the knowledge seekers? Katara said. Yes. One of them helped us find the planetarium before. I think they somehow understand what it is we hope to look for in the library. Zuko frowned. There's something dangling from its mouth. Katara made an anxious sound. She muttered something about how this wasn't the time to be stopping to chat to animals, but he wasn't listening. The knowledge seeker was carrying a scroll in its mouth, one that looked a little charred, as if it had been caught in a fire once. His heart pounded against his ribs. Could it be? He sheathed his swords and knelt in front of the fox, meeting its ageless eyes. Intelligence. Knowledge. He sensed that this strange creature would understand him if he asked for what it carried, but there was no need. The knowledge seeker just stared at him and released the scroll into his outstretched hand before darting off in the other direction. The last thing Zuko saw of the fox was its bushy tail disappearing into the falling streams of sand. Katara came to stand next to him. What did it give you? Zuko tightened his hand around the scroll. Hopefully, the truth. Something rustled behind them. Feathers. Zuko tensed and grabbed her arm with his free hand, forcing her to run alongside him. Momo screeched in agitation, flying ahead of them like a white arrow. Soon, they were sprinting through the stone archway and onto the bridge where the rope still dangled. Climb. Zuko ordered, tucking the scroll into his tunic and unsheathing his blades. You go first. Katara responded, taking up a bending stance. I'm not leaving my brother and Aang. Zuko didn't get the chance to argue. Wan Shi-tong had just burst forth through the archway, stone crumbling around him in broken shards. The owl took to the air, eyeing the two benders like a predator cornering its prey. Your swords and bending are useless against me, Wan Shi-tong said in his cold, ancient voice. Something whistled overhead. Zuko glanced up to see Aang and Sokka fly past on the Avatar's glider. Sokka let go of Aang and raised the book he'd been clutching, using the force of gravity and his own strength to hit the owl with a hard blow to the head. Still in motion, Sokka sprang off Wan Shi-tong and landed on the bridge as the spirit wavered and plummeted towards the inky darkness below. Katara beamed at her brother, but there was no time for happy reunions. The library was still shaking and getting steadily more buried with sand. The four clambered up the rope, Momo in tow, and escaped out the window. The sight that met their eyes had all of them gasping in unison. Those bastards! Sokka growled, dropping to the ground and pulling out his boomerang. There were sandbenders everywhere. Flashes of orange alerted Zuko to his uncle's presence. The old man was standing with his back to the bison and tower, cutting through the ranks of sandbenders with giant bursts of fire. Two of the desert nomads were not far from him, sending up walls of sand and trying to keep the other nomads and the ropes they wielded at bay. Zuko didn't spot Toph anywhere. Then he noticed she was standing directly in front of the sinking tower, feet dug into the ground and her arms raised. Toph! Aang shouted, running up to her. What's going on? She tilted her head in their direction. The sound of their voices must have reassured her because she abruptly lowered her arms as if she had been holding the weight of the world in her palms and could not carry it any longer. The tip of the spire vanished into the sand a second later. Toph dusted her hands off and turned to face them. You guys took your time, she said, blowing her fringe out of her face with a puff of breath. Katara's eyes widened. Were you the one stopping the library from sinking? Toph nodded. Though the moment I was distracted with trying to keep you all from being crushed, more sand sailors arrived and those sandbenders started attacking. She jerked her thumb over her shoulder. Lucky the old man came to help our friendly koala sheep. Zuko glanced at where his uncle and two of their guides were still fighting off the sandbenders to keep them away from the bison. Without a second thought, he unsheathed his blades and ran to help, weaving his way through the nomads like a snake, striking and parrying and slicing through exposed limbs in a blur of twin blades. Dimly, he was aware of Aang and the others joining him. The combined power of their attack was too much for the sandbenders, especially when Aang learned that their target had been Appa. "You tried to steal Appa!" Aang yelled, magnifying his voice with the power of his bending. There was no hope for the rogue sandbenders after that. Aang unleashed a storm of winds that turned their bending against them. Sand blinded and lashed at the men like tiny blades. Even Zuko and the others had to fall back to avoid getting caught up in the maelstrom. Still, Aang's rage had the desired effect. The sandbenders scrambled for their sand sailors and retreated as fast as their bending could power the sails. "Should we really just let them go?" Zuko asked, lowering his swords. One of the sandbenders who had not turned against them stepped forward. Zuko thought his name was Kumo. "They won't come back," he observed. "You've demonstrated your strength today and Gashuin will be afraid that news of this will reach his father. He'll be too busy trying to come up with an excuse for why he called in members of the Hami tribe to help him steal what turned out to be the Avatar's bison." Zuko frowned and stared back at the retreating sandbenders, watching the sails disappear over the dunes like white wings fading into the sunset. He hated to think what would have happened had his uncle not been there to help. Aang must have felt the same, for he suddenly threw himself at the bison. "You're safe," Aang said, pressing his face into the shaggy fur and hugging as much of Appa as he could. "No one is going to take you away. I won't let them." "And aren't we all aware of it?" Sokka said dryly. "Your little whirlwind trick got us as well, you know. I swear I have sand in places that I didn't even know existed." Katara scrunched her nose. "Too much information, Sokka." "Way too much information," Zuko agreed. Aang pulled his arms away from Appa and stared at them a bit sheepishly. "Sorry. I just got so mad when I heard those guys had been trying to steal Appa." "Yeah, we noticed," Toph deadpanned. Her hair and clothes were smothered in grainy specks. Kumo let out a light chuckle. "It was certainly an impressive display. If Gashuin had known you were capable of that, let alone were friends with such powerful warriors, I doubt he would have tried to carry out his plan." Iroh smiled at Kumo and the other sandbender. "Ah, but you were both a great help as well. It is thanks to your efforts that Master Toph was able to focus on keeping the library from sinking and that our furry friend is still with us." Kumo held up a hand. "Please, you don't owe us any gratitude. We were hired to be your guides. The desert is a rough and unforgiving place, but that is no excuse for Gashuin and Fen's betrayal. I hope you won't judge all of us sandbenders by their behavior." Aang's mouth split into a wide grin. "Of course not. You helped us save Appa." "That's right," Katara said. "We would never think badly of you." Zuko said nothing. He recalled the argument he'd had with his uncle and Aang about whether they could trust the sandbenders. A part of him wanted to say "I told you so," since they had indeed been betrayed, but then Kumo and that quiet guy had not turned against them. The two men had even fought against their own people, choosing the honorable course of action over loyalty to kinship. It was just another reminder that the world could not be separated into black and white, that sometimes being of the same nation or kin wasn't enough. Appearances can be deceiving. Wolf bats can appear as koala sheep and koala sheep can appear as wolf bats. What matters is that we must learn to discern the truth for ourselves. Zuko thought he understood now. It was the reason his faith in the infallibility of his nation and family had started crumbling in the first place. People who were supposed to be his enemies had tried to be his friend and those who should have cared for him had hurt him instead. The world had become so messed up. All he could do was try to separate the lies from the truth in order to stay sane. To survive. His fingers curled around the scroll tucked inside the folds of his tunic. Well, at least now he could perhaps shed some light on what happened to the children of the Undying Fire. He couldn't wait to find out what was written on the scroll. In fact, the moment the group all piled back on Appa and started following Kumo's sand sailor to leave the desert, Zuko pulled out the rolled-up parchment. Very carefully, he unfurled it to reveal several pages. His eyes widened as he realized it was an account written from before the war. The author was a scholar from Ba Sing Se named Shang. Most of the beginning was completely illegible, damaged from the fire that had almost consumed the scroll. Zuko started reading from where he could. I watched the child place his hands on his mother's wound. His eyes glowed pale gold and I felt the warmth of life spark from his hands. The mother was miraculously able to walk again, but the child died not long after. No one would explain why. No one would tell me anything. The whole family acted as if nothing had happened. I do not understand. It's obvious to me that the young firebender healed that woman. I must research further so. More fire damage. More faded words. I think I have found the answer. It took a long time to get hold of the information, but it seems there was once a rare breed of firebenders who lived within the Fire Nation. The people called them the children of the Undying Fire. They were marked by their pale gold eyes, just like that child I saw, though it seems they had high mortality rates. Perhaps this would explain the label of the benders being children. Few seemed to survive to adulthood. It is. Zuko made a frustrated sound as the words once more became impossible to read. The parchment was so damaged. Is that the scroll the fox gave you? Katara asked, leaning over him to peer at the page in interest. Zuko grunted in affirmation. Her brow creased. How can you even read this? She traced her finger along the page. I have tried to learn more about the fire healers, she said slowly, struggling to connect the scorched words. It is proving difficult. They are as old as the fabled sun warriors, yet they are buried in even deeper secrecy. I fear that I am being watched. My quest for truth has led me here, but... She sighed and shook her head. That's all I can make out. Iroh perked up and moved closer to the two. Let me see. Zuko handed the scroll over without a word. Iroh scanned the pages. With every sentence he strung together, the frown deepened on his face. It seems this Shang was indeed being watched, Iroh observed. Look at what he writes near the end. Zuko accepted the charred page. My time is running out, he read aloud. They are coming to silence me. All I can offer is this record and a name, Princess Shu. Zuko squinted at the characters, but could not make out the rest of the name. He frowned and kept reading. Somehow, I know it all begins with her. I wish I had the chance to uncover the full truth, though I fear I will be dead by the time the sun rises. I cannot say whether it would be wise for anyone to follow in my footsteps. The pale-eyed ones are dangerous, the Fire Lord is even more so. Perhaps it is true that some secrets are best left buried. Those were the last legible lines. Zuko closed his fingers around the scroll, bunching the papers in his fist. For a moment no one spoke. Zuko didn't even know what to think. Instead of answers, the account had only posed more questions. Who was this princess? Who were the people who had decided to silence the scholar? Somehow, Zuko had to figure it out. The question was where to begin. Keep that scroll safe, Iroh advised. I'll read over it again later and see if I can decipher anything else. Zuko nodded and tucked the rolled-up papers back inside his tunic. It was all he could do until they found a new lead. That was when a thought struck him. Shang had mentioned that the children of the Undying Fire were marked by their pale gold eyes. It was almost identical to what Shizue, his mother's lady-in-waiting, had said all of those years ago. The words were like a dream now, drifting in a space that had no ties to any set image, but he still remembered them clearly. He has the eyes, Princess Ursa. Zuko's mother had known that he had the potential to be a fire healer, as had her lady-in-waiting. It was entirely possible that the two women had let slip other information. With his memories still incomplete, Zuko had no way of knowing if he could assemble a lead from the scraps of conversations he had overheard as a child. He would have to retrieve all of his memories somehow. It was the only way to know for certain, even if his chest tightened at the thought. His past hurt him, but he could not keep running. Not if he wanted to move forward. Not if he wanted to discover the truth. He turned to Katara, who sat next to him. She tilted her head, gazing back at him in question. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the pinched look of a person trying to appear unaffected, but not quite able to hide her discomfort. No doubt she was wondering why he was staring at her so intently all of a sudden. Zuko took a deep breath. It was now or never. My uncle says you can heal sicknesses of the mind, he said, holding her gaze. Will you help me retrieve my memories? Chapter 20, Trials and Healing. Zuko numbly followed Katara to the stream that bordered their campsite, stepping into a clearing that was surrounded by trees. A dim part of him was aware that Iroh and the Avatar had invited themselves along to watch, but he was too caught up in the emotions battering inside him to protest against their presence. His mouth felt too dry, his chest too tight. It was all he could do not to balk. Ready? Katara asked. She stood before him, illuminated by the silvery glow of the moon. He wanted to tell her that he wasn't ready. Not at all. The last thing he wanted was to rip off the barely healed scab that covered his past and embrace what his mind had instinctively understood he needed to bury in order to survive. However, he also knew that he would get nowhere by running. So he nodded and lowered his head. A silent acquiescence. She closed the distance between them and he flinched when her cool hands brushed against his temples, bathed in the glowing liquid of her element. His eyes fluttered shut, but even the cover of darkness didn't help. His pulse quickened and his heart thudded against his ribs. This was an invasion. Her touch, the water. It was wrong. Without even realizing it, his body went rigid and his fingers curled into fists. Don't fight me, she said softly. Just relax. He inhaled a deep breath and released it in a slow exhale. Some of the stiffness eased from his body. He felt her fingers spread against his skin, pressing down on the trigger points so that she could access his chi meridians. Instinct made him want to tense up again, but he resisted the urge. Instead, he pretended that he was meditating. She was a flame to which he needed to become attuned and all he had to do was breathe. That's it, Katara encouraged. Relax. His pulse slowed. He listened for the sound of her breaths and matched his own to the rhythm, focusing on the gentle rise and fall of his chest. That was when her bending took hold. It was like a watery whisper had slipped into his mind, pulling back layers with careful fingers. He saw flickers of his childhood, himself as a boy practicing sword fighting, Azula grinning with a gap-filled smile and holding up a palm of flames. The images blurred and reformed. He was crawling on a roof to rescue a monkey cat, then he was falling, bones cracking and skin bruising even as fire rushed to cocoon him. Fire is life. Something snapped. The moment Katara's energy brushed against the deeper vaults of his mind, pain ripped through him in an explosion of white sparks. He gasped and wrenched his face away, blindly pushing at her hands and stumbling onto his backside. Zuko! Aang exclaimed, rushing to his feet. Arms encircled him and Zuko found himself braced against a male's chest, though the general size was too broad and the belly too soft to be the Avatar's. The scent of herbs and tea drifted around him. It was his uncle who had steadied him. A hand touched his forehead, then shifted to feel his pulse. Zuko blinked and tried to focus, even though he just felt disoriented and sick. What happened? Iroh asked grimly. Katara swallowed, looking just as pale as Zuko. It was the same as when I tried to heal him the last time, back when he collapsed during that fight in Omashu and wouldn't wake up. The wall of fire? Aang asked, glancing up at her from where he crouched next to Zuko. She nodded. It blocked me just like before, though it seemed smaller this time. Zuko groaned and pushed himself into a sitting position so that he was no longer leaning on his uncle. What are you talking about? What wall? A part of him knew that he should be bothered that he was showing so much weakness. Heck, even having the Avatar all concerned and up in his face should have bothered him, but there were more important things to worry about. Like why Katara seemed to think there was some kind of barricade of flames inside his mind. Iroh frowned and pressed his finger against the center of Zuko's forehead. Is this where you felt the wall at its strongest? Yes, she said slowly, but how did you know? Because that is where the light chakra can be found. I suspect you will find that the meridian paths along the sound chakra in his throat have also been manipulated in such a way as to create a permanent knot of chi. Aang scratched his chin. What are chakras? I'm surprised you don't know, Iroh said. The air nomads were advocates of the belief that a person could only access their full potential by unlocking the 7 chakras. However, most people aren't aware that chakras exist, let alone that it is important to keep them unblocked. Zuko clenched his jaw. That's great, but what do these chakra things have to do with me? Iroh once more pressed his finger against the center of his forehead. The light chakra deals with insight and is blocked with illusions. He touched the hollow at the base of Zuko's throat. The sound chakra deals with truth and is blocked with lies. Of course, this is just speculation, but if you were a bender who could manipulate the chi within another person, for example, like what a healer does, then it is possible that with enough power you could actively sabotage the meridian paths of that person to block these two chakras in such a way that they could become a weapon inside the mind. Aang blinked. Yeah. You lost me. Katara chewed her bottom lip. I think I get it. Basically, if you tap into the meridian paths at their core, you can use the chakras to block the flow of energy and create negative effects. Iroh nodded. Correct. A crease formed on her brow. So, what you're saying is that someone purposely sabotaged Zuko's sound and light chakras to give him amnesia. That's why I keep getting stopped by that wall, because the pathways haven't been fully opened yet. So it would seem, Iroh said. However, as I mentioned, this is all just speculation. The only person who could tell you for certain is the one who did the damage in the first place. But who would do such a thing? Aang mused, propping his chin on his hands. Me, Zuko said, realizing the truth. I did this to myself, though I doubt I had any idea of what I was doing at the time. He'd been too much in shock back then, barely functioning after having been struck by lightning and reeling from the emotional blow of discovering that his father and sister did not care whether he lived or died. His only thought had been to strip away all the pain, to hide in a cocoon where nothing could hurt him. To survive. So that was exactly what he had done. He had built his very own cocoon of fire, shaping it tight around his mind so that the painful memories of his life as Prince Zuko could not surface. He had even managed to suppress his bending. Beyond anything, he had just wanted to stop hurting. You understand now, don't you? Iroh said gently. Zuko bowed his head. I understand. Because now he knew that it was his own hands that had broken the vase and shattered who he had once been. More importantly, he was the only person who could repair the damage. Zuko got back to his feet and dusted the dirt off his tunic. Thanks for trying, he muttered to Katara. He knew it wasn't her fault the healing had not worked. She had done her best. There was no way she could have known that he had twisted his own meridian paths into creating a wall around his memories. It's fine, but what will you do now? She asked. Your memories. He shrugged. I guess I'll have to figure out a way to break down the wall myself. Either way, it's not your concern. She looked like she was going to protest, but he did not wait for a response and headed back towards camp. He didn't feel like being prodded and questioned. He just wanted to be alone, to give himself time to digest what he had learned and all of its implications. It was one thing to have someone remove the seal on his past, it was quite another to have to dig into that barely healed wound himself. Still, he knew that he would do it if that was what it took. He would not run. Not anymore. The only question that remained was how. Somehow, he had to remove the wall of fire. Somehow, he had to learn the truth. Oh. Later that night, Iroh approached Zuko and suggested they do some meditation exercises to see if that would help to remove the chi knots blocking his sound and light chakras. Zuko agreed that it was worth trying, however, as he sat before the burning sticks and tried to peel back the layers of flames that protected his memories, it soon became apparent that he was not making any headway. The wall was impenetrable, constructed with a fire-bending technique that he did not understand even if he was the architect. This is pointless. He complained, flopping against the ground in exhaustion. I've been meditating for hours and I've got nothing. Not even a fragment of memory. Iroh frowned and stroked his beard. Maybe what we need is a guru. Zuko propped himself on his elbows. A guru. His eyes narrowed. Wait, you're not talking about that crazy old relic we met at the Eastern Air Temple, are you? The one who you thought was the Avatar. Iroh's mouth twitched into a smile. I believe his name was Guru Puthik. Zuko just groaned and ran his hands over his face. He would not forget that old man in a hurry. His misunderstanding had led to quite the inelegant struggle between the Guru and his 13-year-old self, complete with a scrambling chase all over the temple, lots of hair and beard pulling, and a dirty barefoot being mushed against his face. Even now, Zuko could remember how smug he had felt when he'd finally got the sprightly old man trussed and ready to be shipped back to the Fire Nation, that is until Iroh had come along and revealed that Guru Puthik was not the Avatar but a non-bending spiritual guide who happened to live at the temple. Then it had just got awkward. Iroh gathered the blackened stumps of sticks that they had been using to act as meditation candles. I know you had some difficulties with Guru Puthik, but it has been 3 years since then. Besides, he did say that he forgave you for trying to capture him. Oh, I remember, Zuko muttered. He forced that nasty drink on us as a token of friendship. The onion and banana juice. Iroh made a humming sound in the back of his throat. I thought it was quite tasty. You would. Iroh chuckled and got to his feet. Well, regardless, I do believe that Guru Puthik should know a way to unblock your chakras. He did say that he had studied with the air nomads and has dedicated his life to understanding the energy within all life forms. If anyone can help you to remove the barrier sealing your memories, it will be him. Zuko sighed and frowned up at the stars. I guess. From his research, he knew that the air nomads had once been the spiritual leaders of the world. However, Aang was the only airbender left now, a 12-year-old boy who had not even completed his spiritual training. That just left Guru Puthik. It was hardly a thrilling realization, but Zuko didn't have the luxury of being picky. He needed to learn how to control his bending fast before any further damage could be done. It was a truth he could no longer ignore. Even now, he could barely produce a proper flame, and he had learned that it was his fire healing that had caused him to lose his memories. Perhaps this would explain the label of the benders being children. Few seemed to survive to adulthood. Zuko closed his eyes, remembering what Shang had written on the scroll about fire healers. Tell me, uncle, he said softly. Do you think this will ever get easier? What do you mean? He sat up and faced his uncle, though he didn't quite make eye contact. I just wonder sometimes what the point of all this is. I've always had to struggle and fight, and I've accepted that because I know it has made me stronger. It's just. He frowned and stared at his hands, examining the tiny scars and calluses. Sometimes I wish it didn't always have to be so hard. Iroh pulled him into his arms without a word, ignoring the way Zuko stiffened in instinctive resistance. I know it seems that life has dealt you a string of cruel blows, Iroh murmured, but a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. He pulled back to meet Zuko's gaze. There is a bright destiny awaiting you, my nephew. I'm sure of it. How can you say that? Zuko demanded. I'm a banished prince with nothing to my name and nowhere to go. I don't even know who I am anymore, let alone what I'm doing. Yet here you are still pressing forward. Zuko blinked. What? A warm smile curved Iroh's lips. Nephew, I know that you feel like you've lost your purpose and are no longer certain of where you stand in the world, but I have never been more proud of you. Zuko averted his face. Don't patronize me. I'm not patronizing you. Iroh gave his shoulders a reassuring squeeze. I have watched you face trials that would make the bravest of men falter. You have suffered so much, confronted insurmountable odds not once but countless times, yet you never chose to take the easy road. You just pushed yourself even harder. He shook his head. Sometimes I almost wished that you would give up, if only to spare yourself the pain. I couldn't just give up. You were the one who told me not to give up without a fight. And that's what makes you so special. You see an obstacle that others would call impossible, yet you always find a way to overcome it. That is a rare talent. Zuko slipped out of his uncle's grasp. I just did what I had to do. I wasn't born lucky like Azula. Then the spirits did her a disservice. Again, all Zuko could do was blink. Iroh's smile widened and he began to tell a story about a man who found a butterfly struggling to break from its cocoon. The little creature pushed with all its might, but it was a slow, grueling process and the butterfly didn't seem to make much progress. Taking pity, the man took a knife and carefully created an opening for the butterfly to escape. When it emerged, however, its body was larger than normal and its wings small and fragile. The man thought that he had been helping the butterfly, Iroh said solemnly, but by creating that opening in the cocoon, he had not given the butterfly a chance to fully develop or to build up the strength it needed. Instead, he had stunted its growth and made it impossible for the creature to fly. Zuko stared at his hands. He knew what his uncle was trying to say. Adversity was necessary for growth. Just as Zuko had always recognized, the endless obstacles and trials that arose in his life had helped him to become strong, they had helped him to become durable. Where others gave up, he persevered. When the odds became unreasonable, he made his own luck. It was painful and exhausting, but his uncle wanted him to believe that there was purpose to the struggle. His uncle wanted him to believe that there was an end, a bright destiny that awaited him on the other side of the cocoon. "You are far stronger than you realize," Iroh said, meeting his nephew's gaze. "There is nothing that can hold you back once you set your mind to it. That's why I know you'll succeed now." He gripped Zuko by the shoulder. "We shall find the truth about the children of the Undying Fire, of that I can promise." Zuko let out a small breath. "Thank you, uncle." Iroh patted his shoulder fondly and then suggested that he get some rest. "Let me deal with the travel arrangements." A crease formed on Zuko's brow. Travel arrangements. Guru Puthak is probably still living at the Eastern Air Temple. That is not far from where we are. I'm sure Avatar Aang and his friends will be willing to take us there if I ask. Zuko scrunched his nose. He didn't like that they had to rely on the Avatar so much. He didn't like relying on people, period. Still, the logical part of his brain told him that getting to an air nomad temple on a flying bison would be much easier than the precarious mountain scaling he had been forced to do as a 13-year-old. He just didn't know how he felt about spending more time with the group. "Fine," Zuko said tiredly. "Do what you have to do." Iroh nodded and headed back towards the campfire where the others were gathered. His request must have been received well, for the next morning they were all piling on top of Appa and flying towards the Eastern Air Temple. Sokka grumbled a bit about how they needed to get to Ba Sing Se, but there wasn't much vehemence in his complaints. For whatever reason, this band of mismatched friends actually wanted to help Zuko learn the truth about his bending, as if it was just as important as their own quest. It was so confusing, though a part of Zuko knew that he had mostly Aang to thank for the ease in which he and his uncle were now traveling. That kid would jump at any chance to offer his assistance, he had been doing so from the moment Zuko had healed him. If we had known each other back then, do you think we could have been friends? Zuko frowned and stared at the boy who had unwittingly helped to shape the last 3 years of his life. He still had no answer. Chapter 21, The Eastern Air Temple. There was a strange solemnity to the group's arrival at the Eastern Air Temple. The giant, multi-speared construction was beautiful in its vastness, spreading out over the 3 pinnacles in a rambling sprawl of bridges and buildings. However, the taint of the war was also apparent. Some of the walls were charred and crumbling. Many of the roofs had caved in while statues lay scattered and broken in the courtyards as if to mimic the bodies of those who had fallen to Sozin's fire. Zuko had never really thought about how much destruction his nation had caused when he had first come to the temple. He felt it now. Aang looked so sad. The kid was always so chirpy and full of energy, annoyingly so, but now there was none of that buoyancy. Instead, Aang ran his hands along the worn stone and seemed to slip into the past. He told them that this was where he had first met Appa. He told them that the temple had once been full of nuns, flying bisons, and airbenders in training. It had been the center of spirituality for his people. "I hate how quiet it is," Aang mumbled, hunching his shoulders. "It was never meant to be like this." Zuko said nothing. He felt like an intruder on a private moment. His great-grandfather was the one who had ordered the slaughter of the air nomads, it would be wrong for him to say anything. Even Iroh looked a bit at a loss as to how to make the situation better. Empty platitudes wouldn't bring the airbenders back. Nothing could bring them back. Fortunately, Katara stepped in to provide the comfort that was needed. "I'm sorry, Aang," she said, and wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug. "I know how hard this is for you." Aang leaned into her, grateful for the support. Sokka reached over to squeeze the boy's shoulder, and there was just this moment of togetherness for the 3 of them. Even Toph got in on the action and made a sassy remark that must have been her version of a hug, because though she called Aang Twinkle Toes and punched him in the arm, he actually smiled. Zuko felt a pang of something as he watched the friends interact. It wasn't quite jealously. He didn't know how to describe the feeling. They just made it look so effortless. Being friends. Caring for one another. It seemed so natural and easy for them. Zuko wondered if it had ever been that way for him. From what he could remember, he had barely had any interaction with boys his age while living at the palace. Azula had her two friends, Mai and Ty Lee, and sometimes he had been cajoled into playing with them, but they had never felt like his friends. Not really. But the Avatar does want to be your friend, a small voice reminded him. Aang pulled away from Katara and faced Zuko with a smile. The traces of grief were still there in his expression, but the smile was genuine enough. Well, shall we look for this guru guy? No need, Iroh said, gazing at a point beyond the small group. He has already found us. Zuko turned his head to see an old man standing in the shadow of the main temple. The loose fabric of his robe fluttered in the wind, bright against the stone backdrop of his surroundings. Same yellow garb, same long beard. The guru looked just as ancient as Zuko remembered, like some relic pulled out from a forgotten past. In a way, it was true. The guru had been alive for over 100 years. He had seen the war begin, perhaps had even witnessed the very fire that had destroyed the temple in which they now stood. It was no wonder that Zuko had once mistaken him for the Avatar. I have been waiting for you, Prince Zuko, Guru Puthik said, stepping into the light. Zuko's brow furrowed. Waiting for me? Yes. You and the Avatar both. The two boys exchanged a confused glance. Guru Puthik smiled and explained that the spirits had told him in his dreams that they would come. As a spiritual brother to the air nomads, it had long been his call to give clarity and peace to those who walked the path of uncertainty. It was this need that had brought them to him. Right now your hearts and minds are clouded, he said, meeting each of their eyes. I shall teach you to find balance within yourself so that you may become the masters of your own destiny. A smile curved his lips. You will no longer need to live in fear of your past, his gaze flicked to Aang, or your own abilities. Aang's eyes widened. Wait, are you saying you can teach me how to control the Avatar state? The guru nodded. Aang's face cracked into a grin. He turned to Zuko. Isn't this great? I'm so glad we came here. Zuko made a non-committal sound. His own mind was whirling with the possibilities. From what the guru was saying, it sounded like doing this, finding balance, thing could really be the solution to all of his problems. Still, something in him whispered that it seemed too easy. There had to be a catch. Will this really work? He asked. Guru Puthik held his gaze solemnly. That is up to you. I can only show you the way. You alone must open the 7 chakras to attain enlightenment. Zuko swallowed. Even Aang, who had been babbling excitedly to the others, lost some of his energy at the sudden shift in mood. It seemed that finding balance within themselves was not going to be a simple task. Do not be dismayed, Guru Puthik said. Though opening the 7 chakras is an intense experience, the journey is also only as difficult as you let it be. I have faith in each of you. Aang brightened, cheered by the vote of confidence. Katara and the others chimed in to offer their own words of support, but Zuko found himself lingering in self-doubt. He had come to the guru to unlock his memories and stop running from his past. It was something that he knew he had to do. It just seemed so much harder now, especially when the not quite suppressed words from his childhood were already sneaking into his thoughts like poison, trying to weaken his resolve. The boy is weak. A miserable failure. Worthless. Iroh placed his hand on Zuko's shoulder. Just like that the hurtful words faded away. You can do this, nephew. Zuko nodded, letting out a small breath. His uncle was right. No matter how much he had failed in the past, he had still kept pushing forward. He had become strong. There was no way he was going to back down now. Guru Puthik inclined his head in a formal bow. Then let us begin. Aang's eyes widened. You mean we're going to start unlocking those chakra things right now? All journeys must begin somewhere, the guru responded serenely. For you, the first step to gaining balance begins with this. He unearthed 3 cups from behind his back, which he must have been holding the whole time they had been talking. Now it made sense why he had kept his hands hidden. Zuko scrunched his nose at the yellowish liquid. That isn't. Ugh. Aang wiped his mouth and stared at the cup from which he had just sipped. It tastes like onion and banana juice. Guru Puthik smiled. That's because it is. He drained his drink and then placed the empty cup on his head so that it looked like a hat. Yum, yum. Zuko resisted the urge to face palm. Guru Puthik definitely had not changed. His only consolation was that everyone else had to suffer along with him. Katara did a brave job of trying to drink the juice without pulling expressions of distaste while Sokka just pinched his nose and downed the lot in one gulp. Toph didn't seem too troubled, but Zuko later found out that she had only pretended to drink, and then had tossed the contents into Appa's yawning mouth. Iroh was the only one who actually enjoyed the Guru's favorite beverage. Perhaps it was an old man thing. In any case, onion and banana juice was consumed and then the Guru led Zuko and Aang to a stream that flowed from a rocky crevice into a group of circular pools. The rest of their traveling companions had been gently dismissed. It wasn't that Guru Puthik wanted to make them feel unwelcome, he just made it clear that the two boys could not afford distractions while unlocking the 7 chakras. That meant no audience. As such, Katara, Sokka, Toph, and Iroh were left to relax at the temple with Appa and Momo until the process was finished. Zuko had to admit that he was a bit jealous. The moment the Guru had started talking about swirling pools of energy and clearing out emotional muck, Zuko knew that he was not going to enjoy unlocking his chakras. Zuko had never been a particularly spiritual person. He preferred to focus on tangible goals and ignore everything else. He didn't even like thinking about himself too much or, indeed, doing any kind of introspection. Perhaps that was why he had fallen apart so badly when he had given up on capturing the Avatar. With no goal to direct his thoughts and keep him occupied, he had been left to deal with the full force of his emotions. It was like walking into a garden after leaving it untended for years, a tangle of feelings and thoughts that was so overgrown and choked with weeds that he hadn't known where to begin in putting it back in order. Now the Guru was telling him that he had to uproot all of the negative muck that remained within him if he wanted to unlock the 7 chakras. His body had to become clean and pure to allow the energy to flow, and to do that his emotions also needed to be clean and pure. Each pool of the 7 chakras has a purpose and can be blocked by a specific kind of emotional muck, Guru Puthik explained. I will show you how to clear the paths between the pools of energy, but be warned. Once you begin the process, you cannot stop until all 7 are open. He met their gazes steadily. Are you ready? Aang let out a small breath. I'll do whatever it takes. And you, Prince Zuko? Zuko honestly did not know if he would be able to do as the Guru asked, not when he was so conscious of his doubts and insecurities. All he knew was that he didn't want to give up. The secrets to his past and the key to his future were both locked inside the wall of fire that guarded his memories. To access them, he had to unlock the chakras. It was as simple as that. I'm ready, Zuko answered. Guru Puthik nodded in satisfaction. He guided them deeper into the rocks, leading them to a misty cavern located beneath the temple. Moss grew on the stone in patches and the air was dank and tinged with the bitter scent of soil. Zuko was reminded of the underground caverns where the refugees had hid in Omashu, only less claustrophobic. At least in this cavern there was still natural light shining through to let them see their surroundings. Please, sit, Guru Puthik said, gesturing to the ground. The two boys sat opposite the Guru in lotus position, following his example. Guru Puthik picked up a handful of dirt and let it slip through his fingers like sand. First we will open the Earth Chakra, which is located at the base of the spine. It deals with survival and is blocked by fear. Zuko felt Aang tense beside him. What are you most afraid of? Guru Puthik continued in a serene voice. Let your fears become clear to you. Inhaling deeply, Zuko closed his eyes and opened his mind to the fear he kept buried within. He'd never really thought about what scared him the most. He'd tried not to think about his fears period. Perhaps it was because he knew there were so many things that frightened him. They swirled before him now like splotches of terrifying color, the fear of being abandoned, the fear he felt towards his healing powers and of losing his bending and identity. The inexplicable panic that froze his body whenever he found himself blind and unable to move, because it was just like what had happened after the Agni Kai. Don't worry, Zuzu. I just want to see how your fire works. Zuko's breathing sharpened. He could smell the healing herbs and burned flesh. He could hear Azula's voice telling him to heal himself even as the blade cut into his skin. He had been so helpless. He had been in so much pain. It was only later that he had learned the anesthetic used during his treatment had still been in effect, despite his mind being fully conscious. Just thinking about how trapped he had felt in that room made his heart spike with anxiety. Still, even as he acknowledged the fear, other images were already clamoring to take the memory's place. He was scared of being helpless, but his greatest fear went so much deeper than that. His body tensed as the image of his family burned bright in his mind. Yes, there was the crux of the matter. The tendrils of terror that enclosed his heart whispered as much. For all the physical pain and near-death experiences he had suffered, the fear that shook him to the core was the thought that the awful words from his past might be true, that he would always be a failure, that no amount of struggling or proving himself worthy would change anything because he would never amount to anything. Even the Fire Lord sees that boy as worthless. Mark my words, Prince Zuko will not last long as the heir. These weak royals are always got rid of in some way or another. His hands trembled. The ugly whispers continued, telling him that he wasn't important. Azula was the lucky one, he was just lucky to be born. Some of his family members had been cruel to him at times, but that was just because he was a burden. An unwanted thing that only caused problems. Everything I've done to protect you. His mother had been forced to leave because of him. Even his uncle had ended up in danger countless times because Zuko could never seem to do anything right. There was no saying when Iroh would get tired of it. Just by existing, Zuko had ruined so much. He had destroyed his family. He was scared of what else he might destroy. Because you are weak, his father and sister told him, closing in like wraiths formed out of mist. Because you are worthless, his grandfather agreed. Because you only cause pain to those who are forced to help you, his mother whispered. Because you are a failure, his uncle finished. Zuko inhaled a shuddery breath. His throat burned with unshed tears, though that was nothing to the pain his family had nailed into his heart with every word. The brutal statements kept echoing in his ears like funeral bells. Weak. Worthless. Burden. Failure. It was crippling to listen to and made him want to curl into a ball and hide, if only so he wouldn't have to see the disappointment confronting him from every angle. Do not let the fear crush you. Guru Puthik's voice slipped through the tormenting echoes. Aang suddenly let out a scream, but Zuko was too trapped in his own visions to spare a thought for the younger boy. He felt so insignificant, so small. The more he listened to the voices, the harder it was to remember his uncle's proverbs or that he could shape his own future. The visions told him that he was just lying to himself and thinking that he had got stronger. All of his struggles had achieved nothing. If anything, he was worse off now than he had ever been. Failure, his family hissed in agreement. Zuko clamped his hands over his ears, trying to block out the sound. Your visions are not real, Guru Puthik said calmly. What you are seeing are the manifestations of your own fears. Accept that they exist and let them flow down the creek. Zuko swallowed and lowered his hands back to his lap. He could still hear his family's voices digging nails into his heart, but this time he let them come. Weak, worthless, burden, failure. These were the words that held him frozen, that poisoned him from the inside and stopped him from truly being able to live or to even see the possibilities right in front of him. To survive, he had to find a way to let go of the soul-crushing fear. It was just so hard. I believe in you, Zuko, Lu Ten's voice whispered in his ear. Do you believe in yourself? Zuko let out a breath. Slowly, he opened his eyes to find himself back in the cavern. Gone were the wraith-like forms of his family, the palace, and the hurtful words. All was silent. Calm. He wiped the tears from his cheeks, feeling a lightness in his body that had not been there before. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see Aang doing the same. You have opened your earth chakras, Guru Puthik said. Aang glanced at Zuko with a relieved grin. Without intending it, Zuko felt the corners of his mouth twitch into an answering smile. They had done it. They had actually done it. Come, Guru Puthik said, getting to his feet. The next chakra calls. He led the boys out of the cavern, following a path along the rocks until they came to an alcove that thundered with the sound of rushing water. The reason for the noise was the waterfall tumbling down from above, which created a curtain of frothy white that spanned the entire platform. Guru Puthik sat down in front of the waterfall and gestured for the boys to do the same. Next is the water chakra. Ain guessed. The Guru smiled. Brilliant. Maybe one day you will be a guru too. Ain rubbed the base of his neck, looking a little pleased. Guru Puthik's tone became more serious as he continued with his explanation. He told them that the water chakra dealt with pleasure and was blocked by guilt. Zuko felt a twinge between his shoulder blades as if the knot he had never quite managed to ease had grown to mammoth proportions, reaching all the way down to his pelvis where the second chakra was located. Look at all the guilt which burdens you, the Guru said softly. What do you blame yourself for? That was easy. Zuko had stolen, lied, hurt people, and in general acted completely against his principles for the sake of getting what he wanted. You're a cruel, horrible person. All you've ever cared about is capturing Aang. He winced as Katara's words pierced through his heart, resounding with truth. She had been right. He had not cared about anything else. He had steeled his heart to the pain he was inflicting so that nothing, not even his own natural instinct to heal instead of harm, could hold him back. What do you see? The Guru prompted. I ran away, Aang said in a small voice. I heard all those people while in the Avatar state. And you, Prince Zuko? Zuko said nothing. His visions showed him how much damage he had caused to those who had hindered his path, their homes, their livelihoods, their lives. It was an endless string of terrible deeds. It was a damning, awful truth. I ignored my conscience, he said quietly. I allowed myself to believe that the end would justify the means, even though I knew in my heart what I was doing was wrong. Aang stared at him with wide eyes. Zuko lowered his head and tried not to dwell on the final image he had seen in his mind. Never forget who you are. Guilt tightened around his heart like a fist made of stone. His mother would be so disappointed if she could see him now. Guru Puthik stared at each of the boys, his expression solemn. Accept the reality that these things happened, but do not let them cloud and poison your energy. If you are to be a positive influence on the world, you need to forgive yourself. Aang drew a deep breath and exhaled. Zuko could almost feel the chakra opening in Aang, like a flow of warmth and light. He had no such luck with his own. The guilt was a weight on his chest, his heart, his very soul. It told him that what he had done was unforgivable. Prince Zuko, you must let it go, Guru Puthik urged. Let the guilt flow down the creek. Zuko's hands trembled. I can't. His voice was anguished. Broken. There was no way that he could forgive himself. Not after all he had done. Two scrawny arms wrapped around his middle, pulling him close. It was such a shock that Zuko didn't think to pull away. He sat there frozen, conscious that he was being hugged by the one person he had once sworn to capture. He had burned villages for this boy, he had kidnapped Katara, made bargains with pirates, hunted the Avatar with all the determination of a bloodhound wolf. Yet here Aang was holding him close as if to say it was okay. As if to say that none of that mattered now because Aang had forgiven him, and he wanted Zuko to let it go. Just let it go, Aang murmured. You don't need to carry this burden with you anymore. Everyone knows that you have changed. Zuko's breath caught. New images flashed through his mind, Katara handing him a bowl of rice because she had noticed he had not been eating, Sokka grinning and calling him stupid names, yet there had been no malice in his tone. Unexpected acts of kindness. Simple gestures to help him feel at ease. It had been more than he deserved. Even Momo and Appa had tried to welcome him into the group in their own way. Everyone knows that you have changed. Zuko pulled back from Aang to meet the grey eyes that stared so solemnly into his own. No further words needed to be said. Aang stepped back as if to say, go ahead, do what you need to do. So Zuko did. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes as he imagined collecting all of his guilt into one ugly ball, all the self-loathing, all the regret. Then he exhaled and simply let it go. It was as if a rusted dam had been opened. The energy began to flow again, washing away all the negative emotions that had been trapped inside. It told him that what he had done in his past did not determine who he was now. It told him that he was forgiven. Guru Puthik smiled at Zuko. Well done. You have opened the second chakra. Zuko let his head fall back, sighing in relief. That had been more difficult than he had expected. Even his body felt a bit jittery, though it wasn't a bad feeling. More just different. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that Aang was grinning goofily at him. Zuko reached over and flicked him in his arrow-tattooed forehead. Hey, Aang complained, rubbing his head. Why'd you do that for? Because you were getting ideas, Zuko said, though he wasn't quite able to disguise the hint of affection in his tone. This kid had saved him, whether Aang realized it or not. Zuko didn't know if he would have been able to open the second chakra without Aang's support. It was a humbling realization, but that didn't mean he was going to start hugging him or singing songs about peace and rainbows. Guru Puthik put an end to their conversation by handing them fresh cups of banana and onion juice. The boys groaned in unison, but their protests went ignored. Instead, they were told to drink up. It will replenish your strength, Guru Puthik promised. More like replenish my urge to vomit, Zuko muttered. Aang sniggered and nudged him in the ribs. Good one. Guru Puthik remained unmoved. He just stared at them both until their cups were drained. Once he was satisfied, he guided them out of the gulch and towards a set of misty peaks that stood near the temple. Zuko wondered why they had come to such an out-of-the-way place, but then they broke through the fog and he felt his element wash over him in golden waves. Ah, he said, closing his eyes in appreciation. Guru Puthik chuckled. Can you guess what comes next, Prince Zuko? The fire chakra, Zuko answered without hesitation. The Guru nodded and sat on the narrow ledge. The boys followed suit, once more settling themselves into a lotus position. As you have guessed, Guru Puthik said, the third pool is the fire chakra, located in the stomach. This chakra deals with willpower and is blocked by shame. His voice took on a serene quality, guiding them into opening their minds. What are you ashamed of? What are your biggest disappointments in yourself? Zuko didn't have to think very hard. He was ashamed of what he had become, a banished prince with no home and no direction. He was ashamed that he had let a whole battalion of new recruits die because he had been too inexperienced in politics to persuade his father and the generals to spare them. Mostly, he was ashamed that he had never been able to live up to his role of crown prince. Lu Ten would have done so much better. I betrayed my people, Zuko admitted, lowering his head. It was my duty to protect them, but instead I turned my back on them. He sighed and averted his face. Even if I had the choice now, I don't know if I would want to go back. All the Fire Nation has done is hurt people. Prince Zuko, Guru Puthik said gently, you will never find balance if you deny your heritage. You are Fire Nation and you are a prince. Zuko raised his head. But the only way I can return is if I capture the Avatar, and I can't do that. I won't sacrifice my conscience for the empty honor my father promised me, not even for the Fire Nation. A crease formed on his brow. Besides, father doesn't want me back. He tried to have me imprisoned. Perhaps, the Guru acknowledged, but you seem to be under the misapprehension that refusing to follow the Fire Lord also means refusing your ties to the Fire Nation. Zuko's eyes widened a fraction. That was true. In his mind, he had been unable to separate his feelings for the Fire Nation and his family. When he had chosen to give up on capturing the Avatar, he had felt like he was also giving up on the Fire Nation. Now that he thought about it, though, that wasn't really true. All he had done was refuse to obey his father's order. It wasn't as if he had stopped caring about the people themselves. Wasn't that why he felt shame in the first place? You are Fire Nation and you are a prince. Zuko smiled and felt the energy in his stomach flow unhindered. He had opened the third chakra. Not long after, Aang did the same, though with much less grace. The Guru commented that Aang's chakra had opened less like a flowing creek and more like a burping bison. As if to give credit to the claim, Aang let out a loud belch. Tastes like onion and bananas, but strangely something else. Aang frowned up at his two companions. Pickles. Guru Puthik shrugged. Zuko scrunched his nose in distaste. The burp even smelled like onions and bananas. Gross. Still, as they headed towards their next destination, Zuko found himself wondering about what Aang had confessed while trying to open the third chakra. Maybe it was the reason that Aang's chakra had opened so strangely. "Do you really hate fire-bending that much?" he asked. He remembered the conversation they'd had after fighting Zhao, when Aang admitted that he had burnt Katara after losing control of his bending. Zuko had done his best to comfort the boy back then, but somehow they'd just ended up arguing about his own healing abilities. Zuko thought he might have pulled his swords out on Aang and told him to get lost as well. Wow, he really was useless at this, being friendly, thing. Aang heaved a sigh. "It's not that I hate it. I just..." He shrugged and let the sentence hang. "Anyway, you don't need to worry. Like Guru Puthak said, I'm the Avatar and that means I'm a firebender as well." "You don't sound too thrilled." Aang scowled. "My third chakra is open, isn't it?" Zuko couldn't quite repress a smile. Looking at a grumpy Aang was like looking at a grumpy koala sheep. There was no bite to the expression. "All right, Avatar," he said with a shrug of his own, "but just so you know, fire-bending itself isn't a bad thing. After all, fire was life. It fueled a person's passions, their ability to move forward, and strengthened their resolve. That was why the fire chakra was linked with willpower. Once embraced, a person could do anything if they put their mind to it." Aang suddenly wiggled his eyebrows. "Hey, you're trying to cheer me up, aren't you?" His goofy grin appeared. "I guess this means we really are friends now." Zuko flicked him in the forehead again. "Keep walking." Without a second glance, he quickened his pace until he had caught up to the Guru. Not that it mattered. He didn't need to look behind him to know that Aang was still grinning. Perhaps it was because his own actions lacked bite. Damn it. He really was getting soft. Chapter 22, Unconditional. Katara stood on one of the balconies overlooking the mountains that surrounded the Eastern Air Temple. A flutter of wings signaled Momo's arrival. She smiled and stroked his ears, but a few seconds later the corners of her mouth were drooping. Hours had passed, but there had been no word from Aang or Zuko. She wished she knew what was happening. Waiting in suspense like this was awful. She didn't know much about chakras, but it had sounded like unlocking them was not an easy task. If only she could have gone with the boys to support them. Aang was so young, and Zuko. A crease marred her brow. Zuko. How strange it was that she should feel concern for him. Prince of her enemies. Prince of the nation that had murdered her mother. A violent, unrelenting firebender who had kidnapped her, taunted her, done so many terrible things. By rights, she should hate him. Except she couldn't. She just couldn't. Not when she saw for herself how lost and heartbreakingly human he was underneath all that fierceness. Not when she felt his struggles through the healing touch of her energy, a sorrow so deep that he had fortified his own mind against the pain and locked away his memories. "I think I understand now, Momo," she murmured. Aang had always been so insistent that Zuko was worth helping. Worth giving a chance. Now she could see what had driven him to such lengths. "He really is just like Lee," she said, leaning on the railing. "Don't you think?" Momo tilted his head to the side and made chittering noises. "Right." She was talking to a lemur. Katara sighed and rested her chin on her cupped palms, gazing up at the fire-colored sky. "I hope they're both all right." "They'll be fine." She jumped and turned to see Sokka standing underneath the stone archway that led towards the main part of the temple. He grinned and tossed her a moon peach. "Found this on the other side of the courtyard," he said, taking a bite out of the one he still held in his hand. "There's a whole bunch of fruit trees over there." Katara poked the lemur in his furry stomach. "Is that why you're looking so fat, HRM?" Momo chirruped happily. No doubt he had been gorging himself on every fruity thing he could find. She smiled and shifted her gaze back to her brother. "I don't suppose you caught sight of Aang and Zuko while you were exploring?" Sokka shook his head. Toph reckons she felt them moving towards the northern part of the temple. He scratched his chin. "I guess this chakra thing is more complicated than we thought. Sounds like they've been changing location quite a bit, if Toph's feet are to be believed." Katara frowned at the moon peach in her hand. I guess there really is nothing we can do except wait. Seems like it. Hopefully, they won't take much longer. We need to get to Ba Sing Se as soon as possible so we can inform the Earth King about the eclipse. This could be a major turning point for us in the war if the plan works. She made a non-committal sound. Her brother was right, but she was too busy fretting over Aang and Zuko to worry about such grand matters as defeating the Fire Lord. So much time had passed since the Guru had first led the boys away. Was it supposed to take this long to unlock chakras? Sokka pursed his lips. Hey, don't look so down. I told you they'll be fine. Aang's a tough little guy, and Zuko's no pushover either. Katara ran her finger over the fuzzy skin that coated the moon peach. It's not about strength, though, is it? There was a pause as they both considered what it meant to unlock the 7 chakras. A small breath escaped Sokka's lips. They'll be fine, Katara. Besides, aren't you the one who's always telling us we need to have faith and all that stuff? He nudged her with his elbow. Where'd all that optimism go? A reluctant smile curved her lips. It's not that I don't believe in them. I just wish I could have been there too, you know? Especially for Aang. It's hard to sit around and wait when I know he must be out there struggling. You can't hold his hand forever. Eventually, he has to learn to confront his problems on his own. A cheeky glint entered her eyes. Wow, Sokka, that was almost wise. Have you been taking lessons from Iroh? Hey. He raised his chin. I'm always full of wisdom, thank you very much. That's why I'm the plan guy. Sure, plan guy. She patted him on the shoulder. Keep up the good work. Sokka made spluttering sounds, but Katara just bit into her moon peach and headed back inside temple. Her brother could be such a dork sometimes, but he was right about one thing, Aang wasn't just some goofy, 12-year-old kid. Aang was the Avatar. If he couldn't learn to control his powers now or stand on his own feet, how was he supposed to fulfill his duty to the world when it really counted? Her expression softened into a smile. I know you can do this. Both of you. Oh. The shrine was quiet. Light filtered through the wounds in the stone structure, touching upon the statues of crumbling air nuns and the 3 figures who sat on the ground. It would have been a tranquil scene had reminders of the temple massacre not been so present. Then again, perhaps that was the point. Zuko, Aang, and Guru Puthak had come to the shrine to unlock the 4th chakra, which the Guru explained was located in the heart. This chakra dealt with love and was blocked by grief. Zuko supposed that the feel of the shrine, that strange mixture of serenity and sorrow, helped to set the mood. Not that he was eager to get started. Accepting his fear, guilt, and shame had been difficult enough. Look into your hearts, Guru Puthak said, and his voice softened into an invitation, becoming more of a guiding lilt. Lay all your grief out in front of you. Aang placed his fingers against his heart and closed his eyes. Zuko just bowed his head. Even if he didn't want to recall the memories, the images washed over him in waves of heartache. Cousin Lu Ten waving goodbye before he sailed off to die, his mother abandoning him with no real explanation. Despair, betrayal, loneliness. Zuko felt each loss like chains wrapping around his heart. Face it, Zuzu. Mother might have loved you the most, but she's not around anymore. No one is here to protect you. Zuko's hands trembled. A lump formed in his throat. He swallowed, trying to ease the constricting feeling. It didn't work. Nothing did. The bitter taste of grief welled up inside him, reminding him of the years he had spent trying to be strong. Trying to pretend that he wasn't scared and that it was his own fault if he got hurt, because Father did love him in his own way. Somewhere. Somehow. Dad's going to kill you. Really, he is. He clenched his jaw and his eyes prickled and burned, but no tears fell. He'd cried back then, though. After Lu Ten died. After his mother disappeared. Tears had wet his pillow almost every night, at least for the first week. He'd forced himself to stop after that. Even as a child, he'd known there was no point. Crying wouldn't bring back the people he loved. Crying wouldn't stop the sick fear from churning in his gut. Angela always lies. Angela always lies. Angela always lies. How often he had said those words. Desperation. Denial. It had been all he'd had. His world had been crumbling too fast for him to handle. That was why he had sworn to himself that he would earn his father's approval. It would all be all right then. Even if he was lonely and scared. Even if grandfather, mother, and Lu Ten were gone. He just had to prove his worth, and then father would smile at him again. Father would be proud. Except it hadn't been that easy. Angela was crazy. Uncle Iroh had become a recluse. The palace was a battleground of politics and hidden agendas, and there was nothing but a gaping hole where Zuko had once found comfort. No cheerful cousin to boost his spirits or have sword fights with him when the pressure got too much, no mother to sit with him by the turtle duck pond or hold him in her arms. No one is here to protect you. Zuko covered his face with his hands. The true form of his grief burned into his closed eyelids, giving him no place to hide. Forsaken. Banished. Betrayed. His was the grief of a child left to flounder, a hopeless struggle to stay afloat when all lifelines had been snatched away. You have indeed suffered much, Guru Puthik's voice said in his mind, slipping through Zuko like a warm breeze to part the clouds of grief. But love is a form of energy, and it swirls all around us. Your mother and cousin were your world, but their loss has not left you completely bereft. Zuko raised his head to see his mother and Lu Ten standing in front of him. Both were smiling, bathed in golden light. His heart ached at the sight. Love still exists in your heart, Guru Puthik said gently. It has only been reshaped into the form of new love. The figures of his mother and Lu Ten started to blur and merge like watercolors fading into translucency. Then a new face began to form from the light, an old man aged from years of experience but whose reddish-brown eyes were so warm and full of compassion. A man who told stupid jokes and obsessed over tea, but who had been willing to join Zuko in his banishment and travel with him for 3 years. I am here for you. Lean on me. Let me share your burdens. Something wet trailed down Zuko's cheeks. It was true that his uncle had not always been there for him. Not as a child, and not when Zuko had found himself a prisoner at the North Pole or later lost his memories. But the fact remained that Iroh had come back. He was the only one who had ever come back. You don't have to be alone anymore. Zuko closed his eyes. The grief that had kept his heart chained began to loosen like padlocks breaking apart. He was not alone. His anchor was still there, a father to him in everything but blood. It was enough. Very good, Guru Puthik praised. You have opened your 4th chakra. Zuko scrubbed the tears from his face, still feeling a bit raw and exposed, but somehow lighter at the same time. Next to him, Aang's cheeks also glistened with tears. The younger boy smiled and asked for some onion and banana juice. That request in itself made Zuko wonder if the latest chakra had somehow messed with Aang's head. I can't believe you actually wanted to drink that stuff, Zuko said later, as they headed for their next destination. Aang shrugged. It's not so bad once you get used to it. If you say so. Aang grinned but didn't say anything further. The 2 boys fell quiet and followed the guru to a room that was dominated by a large statue of Avatar Yang Chen. She sat lotus-style, her expression calm. Zuko felt dwarfed in comparison. Please sit, the guru said, taking up his own position in front of the statue. Zuko sat on the ground. Aang threw him a quick, encouraging smile and did the same. The 5th in the chain is the sound chakra, Guru Puthik explained. This one is located in the throat. It deals with truth and is blocked by lies, the ones we tell ourselves. Zuko's breath caught a little. He remembered that his uncle had said this was likely to be one of the chakras that he had subconsciously manipulated with his bending. A chakra blocked by the lies he told himself. But what lies were those? He had always been honest with himself, hadn't he? He'd always accepted every awful truth, because there was no point denying what he already knew. Angela always lies. That's right. It was Angela who lied. It was. Dad's going to kill you. Really, he is. Zuko's breathing sharpened. He kept coming back to that memory. It had just been Angela's way of hurting him, right? His father would have never actually killed him, even if Zuko had wondered in his more paranoid moments. Even if it was true that Grandfather Agellan had given the order because of some twisted, palace power game. None of them had really meant it. I'm only telling you for your own good. I know, maybe you could find a nice Earth Kingdom family to adopt you. He clenched his hands into fists. So Angela was just a sick, sadistic liar who liked to see him suffer. It wouldn't have been the first time she'd tried to make him feel like their parents didn't love or even want him. Is that really what you see? Guru Puthik's voice asked him, slipping through his thoughts. Look closer. So Zuko did. He saw the throne room where Fire Lord Agellan had glared down at Ozai, telling him that his punishment had scarcely begun. He saw himself running away in fear as the flames grew, unable to bear listening any longer. He saw the smile on Angela's face as she told him of the order that had been given, heard the words that were calculated to hurt, but this time he also saw something else. I'm only telling you for your own good. That tone, that expression. It was not the same as her usual taunts. Of course, Angela had recovered a split second later and tossed off a line about adopting him to the Earth Kingdom, but in that moment Angela had not lied. She had been concerned, she had just not known how to express it. Zuko uncurled his fingers, though the crescent-shaped indents remained on his palms. He had spent so many years clinging to the mantra that his sister was a liar. It had been easier that way. Better to believe that Angela was just cruel and sadistic than to accept that she might have been telling the truth. Better to make her the monster than to doubt all of his family. Her words had rattled so many of his foundations. He would have crumbled if he had not made her the scapegoat of his denial. It's because you're not normal, Zuzu. That's why Mother has Shizue watch you so closely. They both think you're a monster. You're just a weak little boy who is not fit to be the heir. Even Father agrees with me. That's why he sent me to bring you back to the Fire Nation, because you'd failed one too many times and he was tired of you embarrassing him. Zuko pressed his hands to his face, fighting back the sting that prickled in the corners of his eyes. No, Angela did not always lie. Not when the truth would hurt more. She had snuck in vicious little barbs of her own, but the underlying messages had been true enough. A part of him had always known it too. It was the reason he had been so desperate to prove his worth to his father. It was the reason he had spent so much time with his mother before she had abandoned him. He did not want to believe that his father cared so little for him. He did not want to believe that his mother had really ordered Shizue to watch him, as if he were indeed some aberration that needed to be kept under guard. Parents were supposed to love their children, not plot against them. But grandfather had died the night Angela had told him about the punishment, despite being in perfect health. Mother had told him before she'd vanished that everything she'd done had been for him, and that was on the same night she'd found Angela taunting him about what father was planning. It was too much of a coincidence. Just like it made sense why father had set him the task of capturing the Avatar to revoke his banishment. You're just a weak little boy who is not fit to be the heir. Even father agrees with me. Father had never wanted him to succeed. The Avatar hadn't been seen for 100 years. The task was only ever meant to be a futile search designed to keep the unwanted heir far from the throne. It hurt to accept that hurt far more than Zuko thought possible, considering he had already turned his back on his father, but that didn't change the fact it was probably true. And if Angela had not lied about their father, it followed that she had not lied about their mother either. After all, Zuko had learned that he was one of the children of the Undying Fire, a type of bender who had been so feared and despised by the Fire Nation that one of the previous Fire Lords had sworn an oath to destroy them. Lies would not have added up so perfectly, the words did when viewed as the truth. Zuko bowed his head. He didn't like it, wished he could shove the facts far from him as he had always done, but he couldn't hide any longer. The mantra of his childhood had only ever been a mantra of denial. Angela was cruel, but she did not always lie. His mother had probably committed treason to protect him, hence why she had been forced to leave, which also meant that his father had indeed planned to kill him in accordance to Fire Lord Agellan's will. It all added up, the pieces of the puzzle fitting together with painful precision now that he was no longer refusing to look at the full picture. Maybe it was true that his mother had not thought of him as a monster, not in the way Angela had intended, but Shizue had undoubtedly watched him to make sure he never revealed his healing abilities. They'd all had agendas. Every single one of them. Zuko was conscious that he was trembling. He also realized that the chakra had not opened. An inner voice whispered that he had only taken the first step. There were still more lies that he needed to confront. No, he half-whimpered. He was already in so much pain. He didn't want to deal with any more. Couldn't keep willingly digging thorns into his heart. You must keep going, Guru Puthik told him, as if reading his mind. If you stop now, you will lock the chakra and the truth you seek will be lost. Zuko shook his head, breaking out of the trance-like state that allowed him to access the lies tied to the sound chakra. He couldn't force himself to see any more. Prince Zuko. Don't, Zuko said, lowering his hands from his face. Just don't. The Guru fell silent. Aang didn't get the hint and moved to crouch next to him. It seemed that Aang had already opened his sound chakra. That's right, because he just lies to everyone else. Zuko was a little startled by the snide thought. Most of the antagonism he'd felt towards the kid had diminished when Aang had helped him to unlock the water chakra. Not intentionally, it must be noted. It was just difficult to hold a grudge against someone who had been willing to forgive him when he knew he hadn't deserved it. Didn't change how on edge he felt now, though. You want to talk about it? Aang said softly. Zuko shook his head. Aang leaned back, resting on his palms. You know, I never pegged you for a quitter. I'm not quitting. Then why did you stop? Zuko said nothing. Hey. Aang shuffled to his knees and leaned forward, meeting Zuko's gaze. I know it's not easy, but it'll all be worth it once it's over, right? I mean, isn't that why you came here? You need to break the seal on your memories, and opening the chakras is the only way to do that. You think I'm not aware of that? Then why? Because I hate it. There was a weighted pause as Aang just stared at him, waiting for him to elaborate. Zuko sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Look, I can't do this right now, he said in a voice that sounded impossibly weary even to his own ears. I just need a break. It will only get harder to continue the longer you put it off, Guru Puthik warned. Then I'll deal with that later, Zuko retorted, getting to his feet. Prince Zuko. I know, all right. Zuko inhaled a ragged breath, forcing himself to lower his voice. Look, I know I should be trying to unlock my memories, but it's not that easy. My family, he broke off, swallowing back the words that burned like acid in his throat. What about your family? Aang prompted. Zuko shook his head. He didn't want to talk about it. He had an inkling of the lie that was holding him back, and he knew that facing it would crush him. He wasn't ready for this truth. Aang wrapped his arms around his scrawny legs, pulling his knees to his chest. You know, the reason I got stuck in that iceberg for 100 years is because I ran away from the truth. I didn't want to be the Avatar, you see. Zuko stood perfectly still. He didn't want to show that he was listening, but he couldn't bring himself to walk away either. Being named as the Avatar ruined everything. My friends at the temple stopped playing with me. Then the elder monks tried to separate me from Gyatso. All they wanted was for me to train and train and train. Gyatso was the only one who thought it was okay for me to be a kid, and the elders didn't like that. They said he'd let his affection for me cloud his judgment, that he was keeping me from my destiny. So you ran away? Zuko asked, then clamped his mouth shut. He hadn't meant to speak. Aang nodded. Yeah, I ran away. There was a storm in Appa and I got caught up in it. When I woke up, 100 years had passed and all of the airbenders were dead. Zuko stared at his hands. He had an odd urge to pat the kid on the shoulder or mutter something like, "That's rough, buddy," but he didn't do either of those things. Lucky for him, Aang didn't expect a response. I hated being the Avatar, Aang said with a grimness rarely heard from him. That's why I lied to Katara and Sokka about it when they found me. I just wanted to be Aang. I didn't want to deal with the pressure. I didn't want to have to give up everything I cared about just to fulfill a destiny that I didn't even ask for. But they did find out. Yeah, when you showed up at the village. Zuko shifted on his feet. Oh. It doesn't matter, Aang said, waving his hand in a dismissive gesture. I learned something, you see. Maybe not then, but just before when I opened the sound chakra. He hugged his knees closer to his chest. I've told a lot of lies and run from a lot of things. I've let people down, and maybe that wouldn't be a big deal if I really was just a kid, but I'm not. He sucked in a breath, forcing a smile to his lips as he met Zuko's eyes. I'm the Avatar. I have responsibilities and abilities that set me apart from others, and no amount of lies or running away will change that. It's just who I am. Zuko swallowed past the sudden thickness in his throat. I think I get what you're trying to say. Then you know I'm right. Living in denial doesn't solve anything, Zuko. Take it from me. I lost 100 years because I was too scared to face my destiny. The truth might be hard to accept, but it's the only way to move forward. So, don't give up now. You've already come this far. Well said, Aang, the Guru praised with a smile. Zuko stared at them both. He knew that Aang was right, but that didn't stop the panic from building in his chest. Some truths were just too wounding. Guru Puthik extended his smile to him. Well, Prince Zuko? Will you try again? Zuko opened and closed his mouth, but no words came out. He swallowed, tried again. Maybe it would help if you talked about it. Aang suggested. You mentioned your family before. I don't. Come on, Aang said, patting the space next to him in an inviting manner. We're all ears. Zuko let his shoulders slump and exhaled a heavy breath. He sat on the ground, though for a long time he said nothing. Aang and Guru Puthik did not push him, they just waited, letting him collect his thoughts. It helped. I'm afraid, he admitted, not looking at either of them. I lost my memories because the pain I was feeling at the time was too much to handle. I just wanted it to stop, so I used my bending as a self-defense mechanism to seal everything away. His hands trembled slightly. I think I understand why I did it now. What do you mean? Aang asked. It was never about the lightning. I almost died, but that wasn't what made me go into shock. It was the fact that my own sister had tried to kill me. It was the fact that my father had ordered Azula to bring me back to the Fire Nation so I could be imprisoned, even though, after 3 years of being banished, I finally had a real chance of getting my honor and title restored. Guru Puthik closed his eyes in understanding. Aang was not so quick on the uptake. So you're worried because you have a horrible sister and father? Aang questioned, scrunching his face in confusion. I don't get it. I mean, I do get it must be hard for you to have a family like that, but you already accepted the truth about them when you stopped chasing me, right? You said as much to Katara, so why would you? Because I didn't want to accept the truth about my feelings, Zuko said softly. Aang furrowed his brow. Your feelings. If I didn't remember anything, there was no reason for me to care. Even when the memories started returning, it was like experiencing it from an outsider's perspective. I just saw what I wanted to see and I refused to let myself dig deeper. But you sensed the truth earlier, didn't you? Guru Puthik said, watching him through those ancient eyes. That's why you stopped. Zuko nodded. Azula has never hesitated to hurt me. My own father burned and banished me when I was 13 and then tried to have me imprisoned when I became an inconvenience to him. He laughed hollowly. I should hate them, right? I mean, even grandfather just saw me as a pie show piece to be used for palace politics. He ordered father to kill me as punishment for plotting against my uncle, but mother got to grandfather first. A mirthless smile. I guess she understood father better than I did. I was naive enough to think that he wouldn't go through with it. Aang blinked and reached for him in a startled gesture, perhaps realizing for the first time how messed up Zuko's childhood must have been. Zuko just laughed again, but then he shook his head, gripping his knees so hard that his knuckles burned white. I really should hate them, he said in a low voice. It's just sick to care about people like that. I did hate them when I was still recovering my memories, but now I can't even. He swallowed, trembling all over. The stinging sensation in his eyes got worse. It's okay, Zuko, Aang said, placing his hand on his arm. You can say it. Zuko shook his head, blinking back tears. For a long moment he was silent, but once again Aang and the Guru waited, letting him speak when he was ready. Their patience paid off. You know, he said almost wistfully, I have these memories of being at Ember Island with my family. Angela laughs and plays in the waves with me, and my father watches us with a smile that's actually sincere. His voice broke a little and he took in a gulp of air. There are others like that too, nice moments that aren't filled with tension or fear. Moments where I think we were actually happy. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He curled into himself, hiding his face against his knees. It shouldn't make a difference, right? Nothing is ever black and white, the guru said in his gentle way. Especially not emotions. The heart is much too complex to be bound by logic. Zuko nodded, accepting this statement. I thought that realizing my family didn't care whether I lived or died would be the worst part, he admitted. The truth is that I stopped trying to regain my memories when I remembered Ember Island. It made it too difficult. Because you wanted to hate your father and sister, Guru Puthik prompted. Zuko swallowed against the hard lump in his throat. It was better to pretend I wanted nothing to do with them than to accept the truth. You still love them, Aang said, putting the pieces together. Yeah. Zuko hiccuped on a half-sob, half-laugh. How pathetic can I get, right? My own sister tries to kill me and here I am torn between wanting to hate her and hoping that she'll turn over a new leaf so we can be a family again. Aang wrapped his arms around him, ignoring the way Zuko tensed from the contact. I don't think you're pathetic, he said earnestly. The monks always taught us that we should love and forgive everyone despite their flaws. He pulled back a fraction, chewing on his lip. Though maybe you should be careful around Angela, 'cause she's not very nice and... Zuko placed his palm against Aang's tattooed forehead and pushed back firmly to break the hug. Avatar, he said. Shut up. Aang smiled a bit sheepishly. Sorry. I really don't think you're being pathetic, though. Indeed, Guru Puthik agreed. If anything, this proves that your heart is more pure than most. You love unconditionally. Zuko's cheeks warmed. It's not like I don't feel resentment. I do hate them for what they've done to me. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. I guess I just can't let go of the fact that we're still family. Maybe it doesn't mean anything to them, but it does to me. He gave a half-hearted shrug. I don't know. Guru Puthik smiled and filled a cup with onion and banana juice. Here. Zuko scrunched his face. Thanks, but I'll pass. Oh, but I insist. The cup got shoved into his hand. Drink up. You've earned it. When Zuko just blinked at the old man, Guru Puthik's smile widened. It was actually kind of creepy. You didn't notice, did you? The Guru observed, his eyes twinkling a little. Why don't you take another look at your sound chakra? Zuko's brow furrowed, but he closed his eyes and centered on the point in his throat where the energy had been blocked. Except there was no seal now. The energy flowed freely. Somehow, he'd opened his sound chakra. All the lies he had told himself that he despised his family, that he hoped he never had to see them again because they had hurt him too much had been replaced with a quiet acceptance. He still loved his father and sister, and though he genuinely wished he felt otherwise, it was the truth. The knowledge wasn't liberating, but it did give him an odd sense of peace. Huh, he said, opening his eyes. I thought opening that chakra would have made more of an impact. I think it did, Guru Puthik answered. You might not realize it now, but you will. Zuko nodded and, because it seemed only natural, downed the cup of banana and onion juice. He regretted the action a second later. Aang and the Guru could say what they liked, but that stuff was plain nasty. Aang got to his feet. All right. He cried, raising his fist to the air. Just 2 more chakras to go. Zuko arched his eyebrow. I don't see why you're so excited. Frankly, opening the chakras was an awful experience. He was sick of feeling vulnerable and exposed. His only consolation was that Aang usually ended up crying as well. Then again, the kid had always been a bit of a crybaby. Damn it. Aang grinned, no trace of tears now aside from his puffy, red-rimmed eyes. More like why aren't you more excited? We're so close to the end. Soon, I'll be able to control the Avatar state. Do you know how amazing that is? Zuko did. He had seen Aang out of control in the Avatar state several times and he had since learnt that those powers terrified the boy. He wished he could view the end of his own journey with as much anticipation, but he still wasn't sure exactly what it would mean for him. Guru Puthik had only hinted that the balance he would gain through unlocking the chakras would help him to master his destiny. Whatever that meant. Let's go, let's go. Aang urged, practically floating as puffs of wind gathered around him in his enthusiasm. The next chakra awaits. Guru Puthik smiled at Zuko. Shall we? Zuko sighed and got to his feet. All right, he said, but no more onion and banana juice. I really will be sick. The answering chuckles did little to assure him that his warning had been taken seriously. Still, as Zuko followed the two, he couldn't help but note that he felt so much lighter, as if there was a new spring in his step. He doubted it had anything to do with that awful juice the guru kept forcing on him, but maybe there was something to be said for this finding balance nonsense. At the very least, he was glad that he had not given up. 2 more to go, Zuko murmured, and his mouth twitched into a reluctant smile. Maybe he was excited to see what would happen when he opened the final chakra. Just a little. X-23, Destiny. We lost the Avatar's trail. Mai kept her voice calm as she gave her report. She did not bring good news, and Azula had a habit of taking her frustration out on the messenger. Not that Azula ever yelled. No, she had too much self-possession to indulge in such an excess of emotion. Instead, Azula liked to prick and prod at her friends with little stabs of cruelty. The only way for Mai to minimize the target on her head was to appear as bland as possible and make the lure of doling punishment less satisfying. There could be no hint of fear. No doubts. All Mai had to do was state the facts. So she told Azula that it was currently not in their power to pursue the Avatar. The bison was last sighted heading towards the southeastern coast. It was very likely that the Avatar and his companions had left the Earth Kingdom. Since there had been no word of General Iroh or Prince Zuko, she surmised that the 2 traders had escaped with the Avatar. We could follow them by boat, but it will take some time to meet up with your ship, Mai said dispassionately. Even then, we do not have enough information to gauge where the Avatar and his companions have headed. Trying to pursue them now could end with us on a wild pig-goose chase. Azula drummed her fingers against the armrest of her chair. Her lips had pursed as she had listened to the report, but now her eyes were keen and seemed to look beyond Mai. No doubt that clever mind was being put to work. For all that Azula was a powerful bender, her greatest weapon was her ability to strategize and turn any situation to her advantage. She could form plans and plot out the resulting chain of events with the skill of a pie show master who could envision victory with a single move. That was why Mai was not surprised when Azula's lips curved into one of her sharp little smiles. If we cannot follow the Avatar, Azula said, crossing her legs in a relaxed manner, we will simply have him come to us. Mai did not even blink at the bold statement. She had known the princess long enough to understand that the claim wasn't an idle boast. What are your orders? She asked. Azula's smile widened. How do you feel about conquering Ba Sing Se? Oh. It was quiet at the Eastern Air Temple. Mist shrouded everything below the narrow path that forged a staircase up the mountain. Zuko felt like he was walking into the sky. The setting sun had never seemed so big, so bright. It glowed all around him, spreading light in swirls of pink and gold, an endless stream of color for an endless sky. Guru Puthik stopped and gestured for Zuko and Aang to sit. Once the 3 of them were settled, he explained that the 6th pool of energy was the light chakra, located in the center of the forehead. It deals with insight and is blocked by illusion, Guru Puthik said in his serene way. The greatest illusion of this world is the illusion of separation. Things you think are separate and different are actually one and the same. Like the 4 nations, Aang observed. Yes, Guru Puthik acknowledged. We are all one people, but we live as if divided. Zuko considered those words. He had traveled the world for 3 years, but it had taken losing his memories and his status as a prince, even a banished one, to fully understand that humans were humans regardless of where they were born. It was the war that had barricaded the nations inside fortresses of suspicion and isolation, a dividing mentality of black and white, friend and foe. But then what illusion was blocking his chakra? He had already come to terms with the fact that the concept of Fire Nation supremacy was nothing more than a lie to justify the war, along with every other bit of propaganda that had been taught to him as a child. Zuko knew better now. Maybe it was hard to always act with that knowledge in mind, but he was trying. That had to count for something, right? So, what you're saying is that someone purposely sabotaged Zuko's sound and light chakras to give him amnesia. That's why I keep getting stopped by that wall. That's right. Katara had mentioned that the wall of fire blocking the deeper vaults of his mind felt at its strongest where his chi paths connected with the light chakra. Zuko got the sense that he had broken through one of the illusions when he had regained his identity and the use of his bending. Before that day, he had not been content to rely on lies to fix his shattered world. Instead, he had gone a step further and given himself amnesia to cut all ties to his family and the Fire Nation. He had become Lee, a non-bending warrior with no home and no family. But that illusion wasn't the issue anymore. He knew who he was, and the only reason he couldn't firebend at the moment was because he had depleted his chi too much when he had healed his uncle. No, there was something else holding him back. The greatest illusion of this world is the illusion of separation. We're all connected, Aang said, his voice soft with wonder. Everything is connected. The Guru murmured something in response, but Zuko was too distracted to listen. Aang's words, so simple, had triggered a memory in his mind. It had been the first time he had used his healing abilities. Aang had been bleeding. Dying. Zuko had reached out, conscious of the weakening life force that had pulsed under his palms. He had sensed that the separation between their energy, between their bodies, was not as distant as the physical eye perceived. Fire is life. Zuko had bound himself to Aang in that moment. Their energy had linked. The very essence of who they were as individuals had touched and merged. He had thought he had severed the connection when he had stopped the healing, but a whisper told him the flames of life that he had passed on to the boy had never truly died. That those flames would always burn so long as the two of them were alive. The Avatar told me that he could feel your life energy dwindling when you healed me, thanks to the spiritual connection you share. Everything was connected. Threads of energy weaved through the air, through their bodies, through every living thing. Zuko had tapped into those paths when he had healed the Avatar and his uncle. He had anchored their lives together, letting the wounded benders take what was needed from his own essence to heal what had been damaged. And he had never stopped being connected to them. A shuddering breath escaped his lips. Was this one of the secrets of the children of the Undying Fire? He had the power to heal, to strengthen, but the connections he formed were not temporary. They were undying, forged from a sun that burned with spiritual fire. The greatest illusion of this world is the illusion of separation. Zuko closed his eyes. He searched deep within himself, sinking his consciousness into the energy paths that flowed through his body. The trail was weak since his chi was so depleted, but he was still able to follow the lines all the way to the sun that burned at the center of his inner fire. Life. Power. He could sense the true nature of the sun now. This was the source of his healing ability, though the sphere was much smaller than usual, almost concaving into itself. Well, Zuko had expected as much. What he really wanted to check were the golden threads that extended from the sun, fusing with his own energy and... there. 2 doors. Or at least that was what it felt like to Zuko. The doors seemed to lead to nowhere, existing in a space of their own with no handles to be found on either side. A golden thread linked to each of the doors, thrumming with energy. He reached with his subconscious and touched one of the threads. A jolt of recognition shocked through him. He could feel the corresponding door, feel the pathway that lay beyond, and as he brushed against the seal, a whisper of air and endless spiritual power. Aang. The name slipped into his mind like a puzzle piece falling into place. Yes, that was Aang's energy he could feel behind the door. Zuko touched the other thread and received a similar jolt, except this time the whisper felt like the flames from a campfire, warm and welcoming. That could only be his uncle. He opened his eyes with a gasp and fell forward, catching himself on his hands to stop from face-planting. "Whoa, you okay?" Aang exclaimed, scrambling to his side. Zuko stared at him with wide eyes. "You." "I could feel." He swallowed, still struggling to make sense of what he had just experienced. Aang tilted his head to the side like a curious sparrowkeet. "What is it?" "I don't have banana and onion juice stuck to my face, do I?" Zuko shook his head. He didn't know how to explain his discovery. There were doors made of pure energy inside him that linked his inner fire to Aang and Iroh. The doors had no handles and seemed to be sealed shut, but something in him knew that he did have the power to reopen the pathways. The key had always been with him, he just wasn't sure how to grasp it, let alone what it would mean for any of them if he did open the doors. "Hey," Aang said, waving his hand in front of Zuko's face. "Earth to Zuko." Zuko pushed himself into an upright position. "I think I know how to remove the wall of fire blocking my memories," he blurted. Discovering the connection he shared with Aang and Iroh had allowed him to gain a better understanding of his bending. Now, he could see where he had gone wrong before. The wall protecting the deeper vaults of his mind had been crafted from desperation and pain. It was designed to be impenetrable, but in the end it was also just a shield that he had created out of instinct. He didn't have to break through the fire or strip it down layer by layer, he just had to take back control as master. Because Zuko wasn't afraid anymore. Because fire was a part of him and it had always been his to control. Ignoring Aang and Guru Puthik for the moment, Zuko inhaled a deep breath and closed his eyes. It was not difficult to make contact with the wall of flames. However, this time he did not treat the barrier like an enemy that needed to be forcibly removed. He knew that doing so would only strengthen the wall. So he approached the flames as he would a baby turtle duck, gentle yet confident. Almost immediately, the wall began to flicker and disperse. He could have laughed at how simple it was, but the memories that had been sealed away were already beginning to surface. "Never do that again, Zuko. Do you understand? Never do that again. You must ignore your instincts and do what I ask. Promise me." Zuko exhaled. Just the thought of confronting his past had used to make him buck all the shame, the pain, the secrets. Now he faced it head-on, letting the memories come as they may to fill in the missing pieces of his life. Did it work? That was Aang. Zuko blinked and leaned back when he found him inches from his face. Hadn't that little idiot heard of a thing called personal space? "Everything is fine," Zuko said, getting to his feet. "The wall is gone, though I don't feel like all of my memories have surfaced yet." "They will in time," Guru Puthik said. "What is important is that you have removed the barrier." A smile curved his lips. "Ah, it seems that you have unlocked the light chakra as well." "Very good." Zuko just nodded. He had realized as much when he had lowered the wall of flames. Aang whooshed to his feet with a gust of air, already demanding that they continue to the next location. The boy stopped mid-bounce and a few creases gathered on his brow. "Actually, why do we have to keep changing location?" Aang asked. Zuko pressed his palm to his forehead. "You're asking this now?" Guru Puthik chuckled. "The path to enlightenment is not purely metaphysical. Each place where we have stopped has mirrored the location of the chakras. By physically walking to the next point, you are readying your body and spirit for the next trial. So that's why we've gradually been getting higher," Zuko said, putting the pieces together. "Indeed." Aang shielded his eyes from the sun as he glanced up at the tallest point of the temple, a towering spire that seemed to reach right up to the heavens. "Is that where we are going next?" A knowing smile was all he got in response. "Come," Guru Puthik said, turning his back on the boys. "It is time." Aang and Zuko exchanged a glance before following the man up the mountain. The end was so close that Zuko could almost taste it on his tongue. His body had never felt lighter, more powerful. His mind had never felt so clear. Still, there was one thing that continued to bother him. "How did you know we have a spiritual connection?" Zuko asked Aang. Maybe Aang could give him some answers about the doors he had sensed inside his inner fire. However, Aang just looked a bit confused at the sudden question. When pressed, he shrugged, and said that Roku had told him. "I kept getting these weird feelings," Aang explained. "It was like something was being ripped from my heart. Roku told me that you had created a bond with me when you healed my wound and that the pain I felt was probably caused when our bond was about to be cut." "Cut?" Zuko questioned. A shadow passed over Aang's eyes. "I could feel you dying," he said softly. "Every time it happened, I got weakened and felt an echo of your pain. It was scary." Zuko didn't know how to respond. He had no idea that Aang had been experiencing such awful moments with him. Now that he thought about it, though, there had been a moment after Angela had struck him with lightning where he had almost sensed the other boy. He had been falling, his heart a mess of violent spasms and his body convulsing. Zuko had been so sure that he was going to die, but then the flames had rushed to greet him. In that split second as he had faded in and out of consciousness, he had felt a whisper of air intermingle with his energy. He had felt Aang. "I think I sensed you once," Zuko said slowly, almost hesitantly. "Back when Angela almost killed me." "I remember," Aang said. "I'd never felt the pain so strongly before. It was like there was an invisible hand trying to snatch away the threads that linked me to you. I thought you would die if I let them go, so I held on as tightly as I could." His brow furrowed. "You were out at sea, right? I think I saw you." Zuko's heart stuttered in its rhythm. "What?" Aang explained how, while trying to keep their bond intact, he had got a glimpse of Zuko drifting on the water. The images had been confusing and more like fragments, but it was as if they had shared the same body for a moment. Aang had felt the vestiges of lightning shocking through Zuko's system. He had felt his pain. "What do you think it means?" Aang asked. Zuko shook his head. "Your guess is as good as mine. If he was a betting man, though, he would put his money on the theory that it probably had something to do with those doors of energy. Maybe Guru Puthak can help," Aang suggested. "He seems to know a lot about this spiritual stuff." Zuko agreed that it was worth a try. He approached the older man and explained the situation. Guru Puthak got a thoughtful expression on his face. "It does indeed sound like you share a bond," he said, stroking his snowy beard. "As for what it means, that is something only you can discover for yourselves. There are many kinds of spiritual connections." He nodded at Aang. "The bond you share with your spirit animal, Appa, is just one example. My connection with Appa feels different to what I experience with Zuko," Aang admitted. Guru Puthak nodded, no doubt having expected as much. "I'm afraid I do not know much about the children of the Undying Fire or their ability to form bonds through healing. However, I suspect that Aang's own high level of spirituality made him much more sensitive to your connection." He glanced at Zuko. "If you wish to understand more, you will need to learn how to control your abilities and not just act upon instinct. You were the one who created this bond, that means that you control its potential and limitations. How am I supposed to do that?" Zuko demanded. "No one seems to know anything about the children of the Undying Fire, and it seems like what little that has been written about them has either been tampered with or destroyed. I do not claim that the journey will be easy for you," Guru Puthak allowed, "but by coming here you have already taken the first step. Perhaps unlocking the final chakra will make your path clearer for you." Zuko swallowed back the frustrated words that threatened to spill from his mouth. It wasn't the Guru's fault that he didn't know more about fire healers. For now, Zuko supposed he would just have to see what happened when he unlocked the final chakra. The sky was dark by the time Guru Puthak, Zuko, and Aang reached the top of the tower. They were so high up that Zuko could feel his lungs protesting at the thinness of the air. He shivered and was glad for his long-sleeved tunic. Even the heavens seemed only a breath away. The stars were so bright that it felt like he could reach out and touch them. Guru Puthak's expression was solemn as he faced the two boys who sat opposite him. "Once you open this chakra, you will be able to use the full extent of your power. For Aang, this means that you will be able to go in and out of the avatar state as you desire. You will have complete control and awareness of all your actions." His gaze shifted to Zuko. "It is unclear what the final chakra will mean for you, Prince Zuko. The spirits have only told me that this will help you to realize your destiny." "Destiny, huh?" Zuko murmured. His uncle had told him that there was a bright destiny that awaited him. Perhaps now he would finally catch a glimpse of that vision. Guru Puthak met each of their gazes. "Are you ready?" "Let's do this," Aang said, his eyes brimming with determination. Zuko just nodded. The Guru settled into a more comfortable position and explained that the thought chakra, the final chakra, was located at the crown of the head. It dealt with pure cosmic energy and was blocked by earthly attachment. "Meditate on what attaches you to this world," Guru Puthak said gently. Zuko closed his eyes and pondered the things that kept him bound to the world. The obvious one was his uncle. Iroh had been his anchor during the 3 years they had spent together on the ship, and even now the old man had a special place in Zuko's heart. "Come play chase the waves with me." Azula's gap-toothed smile bloomed into view. Yes, she was also part of his earthly attachments, along with his parents. Those attachments were more painful than what he felt for his uncle, but they were real nonetheless. Even the Fire Nation itself was an attachment in its own way. Zuko was a prince, regardless of whether he had been banished, and the duty he felt towards his people would never quite be erased. Except that was what Guru Puthik wanted him to do. Let all of those attachments go, Guru Puthik advised. Let them flow down the river. Forgotten. What? Aang exclaimed. Why would I let go of Katara? I love her. Zuko blinked. That was news to him, though he could understand Aang's reluctance to forget the girl he loved. Zuko wasn't sure if he could let go of his earthly attachments either. Learn to let her go or you cannot let the pure cosmic energy flow in from the universe, Guru Puthik warned. Aang folded his arms across his chest. Why would I choose cosmic energy over Katara? How could it be a bad thing that I feel an attachment to her? 3 chakras ago, that was a good thing. Guru Puthik would not be moved. You must learn to let go. Aang lowered his gaze, chewing on his lip in obvious uncertainty. Zuko left him to it and focused on dealing with his own earthly attachments. The Guru had made it clear that all of his ties had to be loosened and forgotten if he wanted the cosmic energy to flow through him. Still, something didn't add up. Or maybe it was just that he and Aang were trying to approach the matter from the wrong angle. As Aang had pointed out, the other chakras had helped them both to understand the importance of love and duty. It didn't make sense to throw that all away, not unless letting go was not the same as giving up forever. Sometimes you have to take a step back in order to move forward. Zuko frowned. Where had that thought come from? His uncle had said the phrase to him once, though he couldn't remember when or why. There had been so many proverbs he had been forced to listen to over the years, most of which had been too convoluted for him to unravel. Still, this one was clear enough: distance was not always a bad thing. His earthly attachments were important to him and he wanted to hold on to them, of that there was no denying. However, if he wanted to move forward, if he wanted to go beyond the purely physical, he couldn't bind himself to a single person or nation. Doing so would mean that those same attachments would dictate his every action, just as they had been doing for the past 3 years. After all, he would have never sacrificed his morals to embrace a cursed destiny had he not been so attached to his father or the Fire Nation. He would have never feared his healing powers so much had he not cared about his mother's opinion nor promised her that he would resist his instincts. It was Azula's betrayal that had driven him to throw caution to the wind and almost got him killed, and even amnesia had not stopped his childish, instinctive need to anchor himself to his uncle's side. You understand now, Guru Puthik said, speaking through that strange, telepathic way of his. For answer, Zuko envisioned the different attachments that kept him bound to the earth. The heavens swirled around him, getting closer and closer as, one by one, the ties that he clutched in his hand loosened and slipped from his grasp. Iroh, Azula, his father, his mother, the very nation that had been his home for 13 years, they all faded into the stars. Let the cosmic energy flow, Guru Puthik encouraged. Zuko inhaled a deep breath. Light poured down from the heavens in the colors of the aurora, creating an opening that extended beyond the stars in radiant beams of pink, green and blue. Zuko followed the light, pulled upwards on invisible wings. Not once did he glance back at the planet that he had left behind, he only faced forward. A snaking path solidified under his feet. At the other end loomed a spectral figure that glowed with golden flames. Zuko's eyes widened. He was looking at himself. Carefully, he made his way along the path. Cosmic energy thrummed all around him like a beating heart, beckoning him forward. His own heart quickened in time to the rhythm and the fine hairs on his arms prickled from the sheer surge of power amassing within the starry space. The closer he got to the glowing apparition, the more aware he was of the flames stirring within his body. He also noticed that there was a smaller figure cradled within the apparition's hands. It was himself as he was now, still weak and curled up in fetal position, waiting to be awakened. Zuko stopped at the end of the path. The apparition gazed down at him with eyes brimming with golden flames. It spread its hands in a cupping motion, unveiling the sleeping figure like an offering. Zuko reached out and touched the curled-up figure's forehead, somehow knowing that this was what he was meant to do. A jolt of energy surged through him, shocking him right to his core. He saw flames that burned in all the colors of the aurora. He saw doors that opened and threads of gold that connected to hundreds upon hundreds of souls, like a solar system of planets orbiting the sun. "This is who you are," a blend of voices whispered, coming from every corner of the universe. "Embrace it." Zuko opened his eyes with a gasp. He was back on the tower with Aang and Guru Puthik, his heart pounding and his body still thrumming with energy. What just happened?" he stammered. Guru Puthik smiled. "You unlocked the final chakra." Zuko stared at his hands in awe. He could feel the pure energy burning within him, just waiting to be accessed. In a rush of giddiness he turned to Aang, only to pause. Aang's mouth was set into a decided frown and his grey eyes were downcast. This was not the face of a boy who had learned how to master the Avatar state. "What's wrong?" Zuko asked. Aang hugged his knees to his chest. "I can't let go of Katara. I just can't." "You know that letting her go doesn't mean you have to stop loving her," Zuko pointed out. "All you're doing is releasing the ties that hold you down to her. I thought that would have been easy for you, given the whole air nomad philosophy of freedom. This is different." Zuko raised his eyebrow. "Is it?" Aang averted his face. "Listen, Aang," Zuko said, and he scrunched his nose a little at how weird it was to say the kid's name. Avatar just came so much more naturally to him. "I know you care about Katara, but you can't master the Avatar state unless you unlock the final chakra. You think I don't know that? I think you're scared and confused. You lost everything when you woke up after being trapped in that iceberg for 100 years. The Fire Nation had destroyed your people, the world had moved on without you, and there you were still 12 years old and dealing with being the Avatar." Aang swallowed and stared down at his hands. "Katara became an anchor to you, right? She called you her family, comforted you when you were sad. She made you feel happy. Of course you're scared of letting her go, because it feels like you'll have nothing to hold on to if you lose her, right?" Aang's breath hitched a little. He nodded. Zuko gripped his shoulder. The contact surprised Aang enough to make him raise his gaze. "You're not going to lose her, Aang," Zuko said, and this time he didn't even fumble on the name. "But if you keep trying to make her your anchor, a part of you will always be controlled by your attachment to her. Look at what's happening right now. You have the chance to master the Avatar state, to never have to fear your powers again, but instead you're holding yourself back because you're scared that you'll find yourself alone again." He shook his head. "You're just running away." A rush of breath escaped Aang's lips. You're right. I know you're right, but I just can't do it. I can't let go of her. You were the one who told me that you have responsibilities that set you apart from others and that no amount of running away would change that. This isn't just about what you want anymore, this is about fulfilling your duty as the Avatar." He shifted to his knees, gripping both of Aang's shoulders. "I know you haven't forgotten what happened at the North Pole. Whether you like it or not, hundreds of people died that night because you couldn't control your powers." Aang's eyes widened. Some of the color drained from his cheeks. He swallowed, and his gaze skittered to the side. Zuko tightened his grip, forcing Aang to meet his eyes. "You told me that you wanted me to give you a chance to be a better Avatar. Well, this is your chance. Prove that you will do what it takes to never let the massacre of the North Pole happen again. Prove to me that you're not all talk." There was a long moment where the two of them just stared at each other. Tears rolled down Aang's cheeks. "Okay," he said in a small voice. "I'll try." Zuko released his shoulders and sat back, watching as Aang closed his eyes and went into a meditative state. In a way, Zuko knew that it was cruel that a child should have to take on so much responsibility. Aang should be allowed to goof off like other kids, to have crushes on pretty girls and throw his heart into love instead of learning how to control cosmic energy. Except Aang was the Avatar, and the world needed the all-powerful being that controlled the four elements, not the goofy airbender who enjoyed riding giant fish. It was cruel, but it was also just reality. Zuko should know, he'd never been allowed to have much of a childhood either. Hang in there, buddy, Zuko thought, his gaze softening. They both had duties to the world that they needed to fulfill. No matter how painful the sacrifice, destiny would not be denied. Oh. They're back. Toph announced. Katara glanced up from watching Iroh teach Sokka how to play Paisho. Much to Iroh's delight, a board had been found in one of the rooms, though some of the tiles had been missing. Sure enough, Katara saw 3 figures enter the chamber where the group had gathered. Momo let out a happy chirrup and leapt off her shoulder, flying circles around Aang, Zuko, and Guru Puthik's heads before he settled on the airbender like a furry hat. Aang smiled and reached up to pet the lemur. Hey, buddy, he said, rubbing under Momo's chin. I missed you, too. Katara scrambled to her feet and rushed towards the boys. How did it go? Are you okay? What happened? She pulled Aang into a tight hug. We were so worried. You took so long and... Breathe, Katara, Sokka advised. Or maybe let him breathe, Toph added. I think you're strangling Twinkletoes. Katara's cheeks flamed and she quickly released Aang, even as the others chuckled at her antics. Momo gave her the stink eye from where he now perched on Zuko's shoulder. Apparently, he didn't like the fact that her hug had knocked him off Aang's head. Even Appa got in on the action and let out a low rumble, though that might have just been his way of greeting Aang. Appa certainly seemed happy to see his master. We're fine, Katara, Aang said, looking a bit pink himself. Better than fine, actually. Then you managed to unlock all those chakra thingies? Sokka asked. Yeah. Aang cast a shy smile up at Zuko. Somehow, we managed to unlock them all. Zuko nodded to him, a gesture that Katara sensed was weighted with more than just acknowledgement. Something had clearly happened between the two during their time with the Guru. They seemed much closer, almost friendly. Zuko's gaze flickered to her as if bitten by her stare. Katara. She glanced back at Aang. Oh, sorry. What were you saying? He smiled and told her that he knew how to go in and out of the avatar state now. Watch. And just like that he was glowing, the tattooed arrows flaring to life all over his body. His irises and pupils changed to pure white. Sokka let out a girlish squeak and backed away from him, but Aang just chuckled and held up his hands. It's fine, he said, though his voice was layered with hundreds of ancient voices. I know what I'm doing now. To prove his point, he exhaled and all of the glowing stopped. He was back to being Aang, the boy with blue tattoos and ordinary gray eyes. Wow, Katara breathed. That was amazing. He grinned and scratched his cheek. Thanks. What about you, Sunshine Prince? Toph asked, turning her blank gaze in Zuko's general direction. Got any new tricks to show? Zuko frowned. Perhaps he took exception to the nickname. Not really, he admitted. I know I can access the full extent of my bending at will now, but that doesn't mean I know how to use it properly. His voice took on a dry tone. Unlike the Avatar, I don't have my past lives to explain the finer details to me. Aang grinned. Then we'll just have to find you a teacher who can show you. Good luck with that, Zuko muttered. Iroh stroked his beard. The idea is not completely far-fetched. The scrolls you found in Wan Shi Tong's library might have been written before the war, but Shang did state that he met some of the Pale-Eyed Ones on his journey. The fact that you are standing with us today suggests that there could be more fire healers out there. Plus, let us not forget that your own mother and her lady-in-waiting were aware of your abilities. I know that, Zuko said. I just meant that actually finding someone who can teach me isn't going to be easy. We've traveled all over the world and haven't met any other fire healers. If they are out there, they're going to be very well hidden. You found me, Aang pointed out, clasping his hands behind his head with a grin, and I went missing for 100 years. He's got you there, Sokka said, clapping Zuko on the back. Zuko shot him a startled glance. No doubt he wasn't used to such gestures of camaraderie. Katara repressed a smile. Well, it seems like you both managed to do what you needed to here. Aang learned how to master the Avatar state, and I'm guessing Zuko got his memories back, right? He nodded. The wall is gone. I'm still waiting for some of my memories to surface, but at least they're accessible now. Indeed, Guru Puthik said, embracing the group with a warm smile. My two pupils have done very well for themselves. In fact, this calls for a celebration. Zuko groaned. Not. Banana and onion juice, ain't finished for him. Guru Puthik unearthed a jug and several cups from seemingly out of nowhere. Drink up, everybody. The two boys stared at each other and then Aang burst into loud giggles. Even Zuko was laughing, though he covered his face with his hand in a gesture that was reminiscent of Sokka face palming. If there was one thing that would never change, no matter how many chakras were opened, it was Guru Puthik's love for banana and onion juice. Check the description for the links to the author.